committee room.
Declare interest as we go. We are in session. I'm not aware of any apologies or late arrivals. Anybody wish to accord? Okay, members, on page 5 of your packs, you will see invitations to two events being organised by the Open Government Network. The first is entitled Open Government for the Common Good. It's held in Belfast City Hall next Wednesday the 16th between 10 a.m. and 1 p.m. And the second is How Would You Spend Your Council's Money? And that's in the MAC in Exchange Street West on Friday the 18th, again 10 to 1. Could ask members wishing to attend to contact Open Government Network directly. May I also say to anybody in the public gallery that it is permissible these days to use a mobile as long as you put it into airplane mode and mute the device, and you then connect to Assembly Wi-Fi, and the password details and the rules should be on a sheet on the seats in the gallery. Members, can I refer you to the draft minutes of the meeting held on the 2nd of March? They begin at page 11 of your pack, and I ask, as ever, are members content to agree the draft minutes of our meeting of the 2nd of March? Thank you. Now, today we are due to hear from the First Minister and the Deputy First Minister discussing the work of the Department in financial years 14-15 and 15-16. And that includes a delivery of the programme for government commitments that are owned by OFMDFM. Ministers were also notified of our intention to discuss the historical institutional abuse options as discussed at our meeting of the 17th of February. In your packs, members, you will find the Clerk's brief at page 18. Progress reports on the Department's programme for government commitments begin at page 20. The strategic online report on progress against PFG commitments is at page 46. There's a Delivering Social Change stakeholder update for February 2016 at page 80. The options paper on the historical institutional abuse inquiry are at page 98. And finally, a ministerial response to queries we raised on the HIA options paper can be found in the tabled pack at page 19.
I know, it's not normally that I'm on the left.
We welcome the First Minister.
Good afternoon.
Deputy First Minister, Junior Minister McCann, Junior Minister Kelly. Normally, I think the committee allow 5 minutes for opening comments, but colleagues, I'm sure we can stretch to 5 minutes each after the two principals. And can I invite the First Minister to lead us off?
Thank you very much, Mr Chairman, and thank you for the opportunity to come along with the Deputy First Minister and the Junior Ministers to speak with you and from you this afternoon. Obviously, it's the first time I have been to the committee since I was appointed as First Minister. As you know, I've spent the last couple of weeks going up and down the country talking to people, and people have been very clear that they want the Devolved Government to work and they want it to work for everyone. And speaking for myself, and I'm sure the Deputy First Minister takes the same view, I want to work with colleagues in the Executive and the Assembly to improve the life of all our people. So in doing that, Our aim should be to work as servants for the people who send us here. And as I indicated on the first day that I was appointed as First Minister, I said I wanted to try and set a new tone in Stormont to work together to get things done and to help end the narrow point scoring and bickering, particularly in the Chamber. And I trust that in that spirit we can have a positive exchange of views at the committee. And also I do recognise that not everyone in this room agreed with the Fresh Start, but I certainly believe that working collectively and implementing the Fresh Start agreement is the best way to ensure that our politics deliver. Turning to the programme for government, it is of course the highest level strategic document of the Executive, setting out our priorities for the Assembly term and the actions needed to address them. And our aspiration for the next programme for government is to try and establish a shared vision for the public sector in the form of shared outcomes, and to foster collaboration in support of greater efficiency and effective delivery of outcomes. And the Stormont House Agreement, as you'll be aware, requires the parties that will form the next Executive to resolve the PFG before ministers are appointed, and that constrains the time available for the development work for following the next election. And for that reason, preparatory work is now in hand to help us and to set the course for the way forward. It will be important that the processes that lead to the development of the next programme for government take into account critical influencing factors, and in particular the aspirations of our people, the priorities that they have, the financial position of the Executive, of course, and the budgetary responses to that position, and the increasing recognition that the achievement of well-being is at the centre of government's role, and that a coordinated cross-sectoral outcome-focused model of governance is required to deliver on that. And so for those reasons, we must construct a programme for government that articulates a clear vision, identifies concrete action for delivery, and also obviously incorporates a robust mechanism for accountability and governance, including for ensuring that all departments effectively support the achievement of the identified outcomes. And of course, none of us would say that health is just delivered by the Department of Health, or indeed that education is just delivered by the Department of Education. And we want to try and get away from that silo mentality so that all of us in government are responsible for the delivery of the programme for government, regardless of what that target might be.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. When the last programme for government was developed, the Executive had just completed its first Assembly period. The intention then was to build on the institutional stability established in the previous period and to move to a clear delivery focus. The programme for government set out to demonstrate that the Executive could deliver for citizens, and its content reflects that intention. Essentially, it is a list of the most important things that departments would do, in most cases mandating departments to act individually and without much need for collaboration. The track record of the Executive in those terms over the period has been strong. Of the 82 commitments, over 80% have been achieved. We have successfully moved from keeping the show on the road to getting things done. And we now need to go a step further. We propose that the next programme for government should be characterised by a focus on achieving outcomes and making a difference. We must acknowledge that long-standing economic and social issues will not be addressed by business as usual approaches. Of course, people have been talking about greater collaboration and intelligent, evidence-informed policy for quite some time. Collaboration and a focus on outcomes are being practiced across the public sector. What we want to do now is to empower their expansion through an outcome-focused programme for government. For this reason, we propose that the next programme for government will be built around a shared outcomes framework for the public sector. This must be a small set of clear, focused statements that describe the changes that we are aiming to deliver for people, and these must be rooted in a sense of well-being. The outcomes must be clearly articulated and capable of measurement, and they must constitute a mission statement for delivery by the public sector as a whole. To support the collaboration required to deliver the outcomes framework, It will be critical that they feed through into the important strategic planning instruments of government, and for this reason we expect that major executive strategies will link directly to the delivery of the outcomes framework, and that the work of the wider public sector will do the same. In this context, we would also hope to see community plans produced by local government aligned with the framework. By doing so, the complementarity of community plans and the aims and priorities of government will be assured, and opportunities for collaboration will be increased. For this reason, it is imperative that local government has an active role in shaping the outcomes framework, and work on this has already started. Early development work is in hand to identify potential outcomes for consideration by the incoming executive. This has involved engagement with expert and representative stakeholder groups, and will be informed by the recent work of the Carnegie Trust Roundtable on Wellbeing, the advice we have commissioned on public sector governance and delivery from OECD, and a substantial programme of citizen engagement which we have developed over the last 18 months. There has been engagement of the local government sector with each of these processes, and we will wish to see this continue and to ramp up in the next few months as we continue to develop the development process. In addition, significant delivery capacity resides outside the public sector. In the present financial climate, more than ever, we must look for opportunities to partner with the community and voluntary and private sectors. We believe that we can support this collaboration through a shared outcomes framework by setting a clear direction that others can buy into. It will be critical to the success of the framework that it is owned jointly by all of us in the executive. Each executive party has been engaged in the collaborative design process to begin to construct a framework for the next programme for government. We are grateful for that participation, and we hope to see this spirit of cooperation continue to be evidenced in the future. In your meeting today, you will want to consider some aspects of delivery over the past period, and our officials are here to assist you with that consideration. However, it is important to us that we come before the committee today to set out how we intend to establish a context for more significant impact on the lives of people here in the coming years. So we're happy to answer any questions, take advice on how we can develop our approach and optimise the support of the committee in achieving that aim. I think all of us in this room are conscious that over the course of the last 2.5 years, things have been very difficult, not just on the streets, but the huge challenges that we faced by budgetary matters and so forth. And I think whatever about people's view of the Fresh Start Agreement, the fact is that we do have a Fresh Start Agreement. It has been a good start. Arlene has taken over as the new DUP leader and First Minister, and it's the third DUP First Minister that I've worked with, and I think that our initial conversations have shown a very clear commitment to drive forward together to build a better future for all the people that we represent. And of course that represents huge challenges for all the parties in this room, but I think that that agreement, and there is one aspect of the agreement which we spoke about this morning during the course of our visit to the Victims Forum meeting, which was taking place in the Titanic Quarter, which obviously eluded all of us during the course of the Fresh Start discussions. But we all, I think, are hopeful, and indeed maybe even some of us optimistic, that that problem can be resolved and that we can move forward on the legacy issues which are so important for many people in society. Thank you.
Thank you both very much for those briefings. Later in our session today, the committee will be looking at a different legacy, and that's our own work programme over the last 5 years. So it would be interesting, I think, to get your take on how you think we are doing, and I suppose given the Deputy First Minister has been in position through the whole mandate, it might be appropriate to ask him first, although I know some people think Martin first is a political nightmare to be avoided, but on this occasion perhaps we could try it.
Well, it's definitely a new concept, asking the Office of First and Deputy First Minister, or indeed any Minister in any department, to sit in judgment publicly on the work of the committee. I work on the basis that all of the parties in the committee and all of the individuals in the committee are very genuine people, very concerned about their constituents, very concerned to be part of institutions that are working in the interests of society. And I've never questioned that in the past. I think there is a tremendous amount of goodwill. I know that in public sessions, whether it be in the chamber or even here in the course of these deliberations, there's always a temptation for people to score political points, and probably at all stages of our political careers we've all been guilty of that. But I think in the main, I think what has happened in the Assembly, what has happened in the Executive, what happens at the committees, given where we've come from in the past, has been transformative. It has been something to be, I think, admired by many people throughout the world. Sometimes people who are closest to what happened here maybe aren't as appreciative of the change that has happened, but certainly whenever you speak to people in the international community, they're actually full of praise for all the politicians from all the political parties for the contribution that they've made to the peace process. And obviously in the context of working together, I mean, we all know the institutions were put up in 1999. It collapsed on 3 occasions between them and October 2002. There were no institutions between 2002 and 2007. And it was only really in 2007 that we all came together with a truly inclusive executive, that we began the work of getting to know each other, maybe even getting to like each other, but also to recognise that we have a huge responsibility with the eyes of the world and our own people looking at us. So I would give fair one to the committee. I think the committee does a good job.
First Minister, of course, you've been a minister in 2 other departments. Have you had any sense that the relationship between OFMDFM and this committee is different, more challenging? We have certainly had great difficulty sometimes in getting answers and the timely delivery of papers over the last 5 years. Well,
I've been minister in 3 other departments, not 2. So I've had the experience of 3 other committees, you're right. And all of those relationships have been very positive ones. I have appeared in front of those committees on many occasions. And we have worked through pieces of legislation. I've been challenged on decisions. I've been quite happy to come and answer in relation to those decisions. And I do recognise that things have been particularly difficult between OFMDFM committee and the office over a period of time. And I think if that was taken out of context, you might say, well, why is that the case? But we do have to remember where we were, and Martin's already made reference to the fact that we have had a very particularly difficult time, especially last year, when we found ourselves on the precipice of not having a devolved administration here. We came extremely close, and it was only due to the good offices and the leadership shown by my predecessor that we are still here today. And others, including yourself, decided to leave the process. He decided to stay. I think for what it's worth, he made the right decision, and I supported him in it. And as a result, we're here today in front of you as First Minister and Deputy First Minister to be challenged on how the programme for government has worked over this past 4, and then obviously it was extended for a year to 5 years, and where we view matters going forward in terms of the next programme for government. And I think it's right that we are here. Do I think things have always been done right in the past? Would I have done them differently? I don't know, because I wasn't here at the time. All I can say to you is, now that I am in this office, I look forward, for whatever period of time that is, to a good relationship with the committee.
I relish the opportunity to challenge your analysis, but this is not the occasion, and it would be abuse of my position so to do. I do feel the committee has done some very good work over the last 5 years, not least the NIPSO legislation, also shaping the historical institutional abuse bill. And if I can start with that, Ministers, because last week we heard from Amnesty International and Savia, who professed disappointment on not being briefed with regard to the options papers. And we have a letter from you dated today saying that we have written to the programme director of Amnesty International to inform him of the 2 options. Can I ask when that letter was issued to Amnesty?
I think that letter was issued at the same time as the letter was issued to you. far as I can remember, I signed the two of them together, I think.
So when they came to us last week, they had not been informed?
I don't believe so, but I don't have the details in front of me, so sorry, I can't answer that. I do know that Junior Minister McCann had a meeting with the group.
I mean, you're obviously talking about the issues around the options paper and the decisions that were made at the executive. There were two different agreements at the executive on the two different issues. One was in and around the mother and baby homes and the option there, and the other one was about clerical abuse. And basically, what happened in terms of clerical child abuse, the executive had agreed to engage with the Safeguarding Board, which was established, as you know, by the Department of Health, to examine the issue of clerical abuse and child abuse and to make those recommendations to the executive. And in terms of the mother and baby homes, they also agreed to establish an interdepartmental working group which was led by Health to review the evidence with the objective of making recommendations to the executive within a 6-month period. And I did meet with a number of organisations and individuals after the executive took those decisions to explain that decision, because I didn't want people hearing it on the media or whatever, and I explained that. I got round to all the people that I had been in contact with, and I informed them that was the decision that the executive had taken on that day.
That meeting was you working in your capacity as a member of the Legislative Assembly rather than as a junior minister?
Well, I mean, it made it. I mean, I probably, yes.
So you say probably, but the letter says definitely.
Yeah, well, yeah. But I mean, I did undertake to take up, because I didn't want people, just hearing it on the media. I thought that they had the right to know in their capacity of being, victims and survivors.
So today's letter will be the first communication formally from the department to Amnesty and Savia.
Yes, well, this was a decision of the executive on the 10th of February. As you know, all executive decisions are meant to stay confidential until the outworkings of them happen, and then we were to write to the various organisations after that. We've now done that.
Do you accept the criticism from these groups that what happened was you decided to take a look at options, and the decision arising from that is to set up committees to look at more options?
Well, I mean, just with my engagement with individuals and victims and survivors, and with groups who represent them, I know that there has been a lot of issues in terms of a lot of people who fell outside the remit of the initial inquiry. And I have to say, we listened to people, and a lot of those people were quite elderly. Some of the people, particularly, that were involved in the mother and baby homes, that were maybe over 18, when they went into those institutions. So, I do think that understandably, they were distressed that they hadn't been included in the first instance. We did do some work over a period and engagement with them. And I know that the inquiry chair, I had contacted the inquiry chair myself to see if he would include it and make the scope wider. His decision was that wouldn't be feasible at that time, but he did since include another 3 institutions within that. And I know he made some comments in and around redress as well. So I do feel, that victims and survivors, I can understand, their sense of frustration and their sense that, that things aren't happening, and that there are a number of people who fall outside the remit of the initial inquiry. So I take on board that sense of criticism. Yes.
I think it is worth adding that these issues are very complex, and we highlighted previously, and previous junior ministers highlighted to the committee, that there were complex issues involved in it, some of which included the interpretation of the terms of reference by the independent chair of the inquiry. I think it was right and proper that we respected that independence of the chair. I think actually if you look at what happened in the interim between ministers receiving, for example, the scoping report and this current development in terms of the executive decision, what happened was that, for example, and I know that you're aware of this, that the chairman decided that looking at the terms of reference, he could include, for example, examination of the Brendan Smith allegations in 3 of those modules, but also that he could also look at a number of the mother and baby homes, particularly pertaining to those under 18 years of age. So in terms of us jumping at the stage where the scoping study came up, I think that actually, as we've looked at how this has played out and how the chairman has adjudicated on this matter, it would have been premature, because some of those issues are being dealt with by the HIA and by the statutory inquiry. We are now examining the remaining elements of that. And I think further work is required. You've heard from officials within the department. There is a lack of data. There's a lack of information. I think it's right and proper that we seek that data and information before making informed decisions about the way forward.
I'm sure you'll correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the Chair has decided he can look at the activities of Brendan Smith insofar as they were within institutions.
Pertaining to
so we still have potentially victims of abuse in a non-institutional setting who do not have recourse to the inquiry. And the previous position of the department, as articulated by a previous junior minister, was that those people could go to the police or to the social services. Is that still your position? Do you think that's still a valid and appropriate position? Not least given the fact that Sir Anthony has now said that he will recommend redress for those who fall within his remit.
The terms of reference are very clear. This is around systemic abuse within institutions.
Yes, and I'm now asking,
that clerical abuse falls outside that.
And is it still your position that people who fall outside the remit should go to the police or the social services rather than having their own inquiry?
Well, absolutely. Everybody with information, anybody who's been a victim of a criminal act should go to the PSNI. We've made that very clear. However, in terms of the second question which you've asked, we have indicated a pathway where we're seeking further information, data and research to inform decisions. That is the decision of the executive on this matter. There is, and there was a judgment given that there was insufficient data and information to make that decision at this juncture, but we have asked for that information to come back, I think within a 6-month period.
Sir Anthony, I think, is due to report in January of 2017.
That's right, yeah.
And therefore it is possible, and I know I'm speculating here, but I think it is important to look ahead. If he is recommending redress, then I think the victims and survivors might have a reasonable expectation that there will be a budget line in financial year 17-18. Is that your intention?
Well, obviously we have to, there's no point in talking about hypotheticals. The reality of situations is often difficult enough to deal with rather than hypotheticals. But we will await Sir Anthony's judgment. And then whoever is in the Office of First Minister and Deputy First Minister will have to assess where the funding comes from. Obviously, the various institutions will have a duty to come forward in respect of money, and we would certainly expect that to be the case, as it has happened in the Republic of Ireland. And then we will be able to assess how much money we will need in respect of budgetary pressures, if there are indeed to be any redress recommendations.
Thank you.
I think we are in all probability looking at the prospect whenever the report comes to the executive in 2017 that such recommendations will be made. So it would naturally follow that whoever is in responsible positions at that stage vis-a-vis dealing with this make provision for such an eventuality financially.
Okay, thank you. Gordon Lance.
Thank you, Chair. I thank the ministers for coming along. If we could have a look back over the last programme for government and also have a look forward to the next one as well. First of all, in terms of job creation, it's obviously an issue that's very important to people, and the executive set themselves a very ambitious target in terms of the number of jobs that should be promoted over this Assembly term. The Executive has managed to smash through that target, and that has been very beneficial indeed. Over 37,000 jobs promoted during this mandate. The original target was 25,000, so that's extremely positive, and it's right that we remember that these figures in terms of jobs and investment, these are individual people, and these are people that now have a job as a result of actions that have been taken, and that's very, very positive. And in my own constituency, Invest NI directly have been responsible for the creation of 800 jobs, and that's very good news, and that unemployment has been cut by a third during that time. So although we have a lot of good successes to look back on, how moving forward can we ensure that that pace of job creation stays the same?
Well, first of all, the 37,000 jobs, of course, is just up to March of 2015. If you look to date, we're well past that. We're well over the 40,000 now in respect of job creation, and it certainly gives me great pleasure because I remember well when we were sitting around trying to decide on that jobs target back in 2011, and it started out at 20,000. It was then moved to 25,000, and I remember sitting in the Committee of Enterprise, Trade and Investment, and the chairman indicating to me that there was no way we could reach that sort of figure in the mandate. So I am particularly delighted, obviously, given my previous roles, that we were able to create those jobs at a time, and I think people forget this, at a time when we were going through a particularly difficult period in terms of the world recession. We were able to bring more and better jobs to Northern Ireland than ever before. So that is a very good programme for government commitment that has been met. In terms of looking to the future, obviously the devolution of corporation tax and the ability to set the date and the rate has been given to us. We look forward to using that extra tool now in our box of foreign direct investment in particular, and attracting that into Northern Ireland in a way that we haven't been able to do, and that will give us access to companies that otherwise we hadn't been able to get into, and I hope that that will certainly aid our job creation in the coming years.
Well, I absolutely agree with Arlene. I think that the ability to attract the amount of new jobs during a time of a world economic downturn was a pretty incredible achievement for this administration. And I think key to all of that was the support that we've received from North America in particular, and from successive US administrations, right through the Clinton administration to the Bush administration through to the Obama administration. And we shouldn't forget the tremendous contribution made to jobs and economic progress of our own Indigenous businesses during that time. But obviously our relationship with the US is crucial. We have a very good, very close relationship, and First Minister and I will be travelling there at the weekend to New York, Washington and California. And I think that the message that we have been bringing to the United States, particularly since the first time Dr. Paisley and I went there in December 2007, was that things had fundamentally changed here for the better in terms of the security situation. Peace had arrived. That was a good news story in the United States. So what is absolutely critical to continuing to improve the jobs position in relation to our people, including young people who need a particular focus, is the ongoing success of the peace process, and an ongoing good news message coming from here that we're continuing on an upward trajectory in terms of making a success of what we're trying to do. And that's why I think it needs to be unreservedly condemned, the activities of those people who are still out there, who believe that violence is the way forward. And we saw an example of that last week with an attempt to murder a prison officer about to do his duty. So I think that all of us are very conscious of the need to continue to work closely with the United States of America, but also to work closely with those who are working day and daily on our behalf, the police services, north and south, to thwart the activities of those who would try to plunge us back to the past.
You mentioned the importance of North America in terms of the support that we're given, as well as foreign direct investment. But what has the executive done, or what can the next executive do in order to ensure that we get the benefit of the emerging markets with job creation? And
well, I think Arlene answered it. That what is key for us in the time ahead, and we know there is intense interest among key businesses in the United States about our proposition here, more so now that we have a decision on the basis of affordability within the Fresh Start Agreement that we will have a reduced rate of corporation tax. So I think we're in a good place going into the next term of the Assembly. I think that the work done by the Deputy Minister, whenever Arlene was there, Dr. Paisley, Peter Robinson, myself, all our Deputy Ministers after Arlene moved, is hugely important in terms of attracting foreign direct investment here. And obviously key to all of that is the build-up of relationships, and that's why we're very focused on not just the North American relationships, but also building relationships in China. And we've had a number of good news stories from there in terms of our exports, pork exports, etc. The DARD Minister has been there on several occasions. And I think, we're very focused on trying to build relationships wherever we can utilise the outcome of those relationships for the benefit of increased manufacturing exports and obviously jobs which will flow as a result of that. And I think if you look at the manufacturing, and I know that there was a number of bad news stories in terms of the Michelin situation, Bombardier, but the reality is that there's more people working in manufacturing now in the north than there were in 2008 whenever the downturn began. So we need to ensure that we continue to encourage that and encourage those companies, many of which are indigenous companies who are having huge successes selling their wares abroad.
And part of job creation or tourism can be part of that job creation, and it's obviously a great natural resource that we have around the country that should be exploited for tourism. What is your vision for tourism going forward? We obviously want to see more people coming here and spending more time here, and from a constituency point of view, obviously after visitors come into the country and visit Fermanagh, we want to get them to East Antrim as well, so I'm hoping the executive will encourage that as well in the next Assembly.
You get the brownie points for mentioning Fermanagh. Well, of course, the target is to make the tourism industry a £1 billion industry for Northern Ireland by 2020. I think we're on track to do that. We certainly have been able to attract more people here, and we found that large-scale events have been a great part of that, and having the infrastructure for tourism has been vitally important as well, of course, with things like the Titanic Belfast, Giant's Causeway Visitor Centre, all of the investment that has gone into the City of Londonderry, all of the investment that goes in right around the country. It is important now that we get people to come in, and that's a wider proposition in relation to having direct access. And I am pleased to see more direct access growing in and out of Northern Ireland over this past period of time. And it is so important that we have more people visit us, because when they come as tourists, then they may often come back for other reasons as well, and that's why it is important to challenge perceptions about Northern Ireland, and we can only do that when we bring people to Northern Ireland so that they can see what's available to them here when they come. So tourism, some people in the past may have seen it as not a mainstream industry. It is vitally important for Northern Ireland in so many ways, and I hope that the Year of Food this year will play a very strong part of that.
Just finally, one more question, Chair, if that's allowed. In terms of your own department, one of the most successful programmes has been the numeracy and literacy programme within delivering social change. Over 18,000 young people assisted in terms of numeracy and literacy. Over 85% of those achieved their individual target, and we had 300 teachers that were employed because of that. What stage is the assessment of that programme at? And in terms of the next stages, will we be at a point where this could be mainstream, that we have this as part of the core, it could be core funded for the Department of Education?
Well, certainly the whole idea, and obviously I wasn't in the department at the time that it was brought forward, was to try and do something different, and that's what delivering social change has been all around. And then if it works, then that it can be mainstreamed, and I believe very firmly that some of the elements of what happened around the literacy and numeracy programme, what happened around the nurture programmes have been hugely successful, and we are looking to outcomes in the future. Sometimes those outcomes can't be measured until 10 years later, and we have to figure out how we're going to manage all of that in the new programme for government structure. So if you have a child that's 3 or 4 and you have an early intervention with that child, then you're going to see the benefit of that further down the line. It's not going to happen within a couple of years, it'll happen within 5, 10, 15 years, and we have to work out how we deal with that. But I think it has been a hugely successful process to date.
Well, just to go back to the previous question, I was in your constituency just 3 weeks ago meeting with the local business community in Larne, and they too emphasised the importance of tourism. And I think we all accept that East Antrim and North Antrim is some of the most beautiful parts of the island of Ireland, and that we need to exploit what they have to offer. And I think I absolutely agree with Arlene There's tremendous potential within the tourism industry, and we're very focused on taking full advantage of all of that. In terms of the delivering social change programmes, particularly the issue that relates to literacy and numeracy, at this early stage it has been signalled up as a huge success, and in regard to the future of the programmes, the Education Minister has agreed to fund a legacy programme which aims to harness the success of the literacy and numeracy signature programme through sharing the innovative learning and best practice identified through the school system. And I think what we all have to do as well is learn from good practice that is happening even in some of our own schools, because I was very interested to see the fantastic report which was reported widely, including on the news in England, about the success that Jarlath Burns is having at St Paul's School in Bestbrook, where the community is very proactively involved in the education of their young people. And I think an awful lot of lessons can be learned from that. We all know that the key to success in any school is having an innovative, imaginative and very intelligent principal. And I think the work that Jarlath Burns is doing there is certainly something that many schools could learn from.
Thanks very much.
I think the Literacy and Numeracy project is going to be hailed as a roaring success, but not mainstreamed. And was that not one of the ambitions of the entire project?
Well, I think in the course of putting together our programme for government, which we're presently engaged in and which will have to be signed off on by whatever parties wish to take up positions in the executive in the aftermath of the election, I certainly think it's a very powerful argument to ensure that it is mainstreamed, yes.
There was another signature project with the objective of nurturing our children, and that was the Play and Leisure project announced October 13 with a budget of 1.6 million. Has that money been spent?
Well, obviously there was a difficulty with, in terms of the Delivering Social Change Central Fund, the monies. We were hoping to do that Play and Leisure project as one of the future signature projects. I know today, for instance, tonight there's a play symposium is being taking place here over the next couple of days. Myself and the previous Junior Minister, Bell, there was one in Scotland about 2 years ago. And really, it is coming together to actually, to let people know that the benefits of play in terms of a child's development and the benefits of play in terms of even, parents playing, sharing that with their children. But there was some of that money that was put towards the councils in terms of them taking forward their play and leisure policy and that as well. And why we didn't have the money to do what we wanted to do in the initial stages around the signature project that you said, we did invest some money into creating through Playboard and other organisations.
How much did you actually spend then?
I'm not sure the actual spend. I don't know if you know the actual spend of it.
It's worth highlighting that delivering social change was not about the signature projects. Signature projects were indicative of the agenda. The agenda was very much about trying to encourage risk and innovation in other departments. It was trying to encourage good design in projects, which was very targeted on evidence-based, focused on outcomes delivery. And I think we actually did achieve that. Now, what it did do is it got a huge amount of interest from other departments coming forward with ideas that they wanted to be funded centrally. Now, in terms of the initial 6 Delivering Social Change projects, that was 27 million spent against that. Now, that was our reaction in a sense to understanding at a very early stage that the SIF profile, for example, was going to take longer than we anticipated. So instead of doing nothing, we moved into the space of actions under signature projects. In relation to the Play project, as Jennifer has highlighted, initially there was an announcement of a signature project. However, when we looked at the profile of the initial 6, we realised that unless we were getting additional money coming into that, it would not be possible. However, OFMDFM has a very good record in relation to play. If you look at the amount of play facilities, early years, intelligent and developmental play, funded through the likes of the Social Investment Fund already, but also through our signature projects, we've got a huge a good story to tell. And that's very much at the heart of the Delivering Social Change agenda, which is about getting policies that are multi-policy, multi-objective. It's not just a social investment, it's not just a regeneration project, it's also a play, recreation, developmental and educational project.
Can I also just add, sorry, Nick, just our chair, you know, in terms of, because the officials may have the exact figures, I don't have them with me, but just in terms of even when we were looking at bringing forward that sort of play and leisure signature programme, but when you look at now the summer camps, for instance, as part of the Together Building United community, it is actually modelled on that type of programme where children from different community backgrounds, from different cultural backgrounds and different religious backgrounds come together in a programme, a summer camp for 2 weeks or a week or whatever the organisation chose to do. We had a number of pilots and there was over 300 young people went through those pilots last year, and we're going to be taking them forward this year. Myself and Emma actually went to a celebration event, and I have to say, and that was all about play, it was about leisure. It might have been specifically or sort of headlined as the Play and Leisure Signature Programme, but that was all part of the Delivering Social Change, where that framework came in, and Together Building United Community. And I suppose that it's a sense of where all those strategies are joined up, and they're not all sitting, you know, in different silos and different places. So that was part of that also, of bringing that forward. But the council part of it also was an essential component of that too.
I'm interested you to describe a programme as a silo. I think if junior ministers stand up publicly, as they did in October 2013, and say we are going to have a play and leisure project and we're going to give it a budget line of 1.6 million, it's perfectly valid for this committee to ask what happened to the money. David McElveen.
Thank you very much, Chair. And thank you, Ministers, for coming today. I just wanted to move on to the small and medium sized businesses, which obviously there has been mixed fortunes for throughout this Assembly term. I wonder, maybe just at this stage, sort of looking overall, could we get some indication from the department's point of view of just the general health of where our SME sector is today?
Well, in terms of, as you know, I would say about 90% of our economy is based around the SME sector in Northern Ireland, probably more so than any other part of the United Kingdom. And so therefore it is one that needs our attention greatly, and I spent some time up in Coleraine recently with some of those micro businesses, in other words businesses with less than 10 employees, and it was really about trying to facilitate them and allowing them to take time to think about their business, where was their business going, how could they innovate, how could they employ research and development techniques into their businesses when it was such a small business. And we've been doing a lot of work on that right across government. How can we facilitate and encourage and provide the ecosystem for those businesses to grow and develop to the next stage? Because as you will well know from your time in the Deputy Committee, we have very large companies in Northern Ireland and we have very small companies in Northern Ireland, and there's not very much in between. We don't have that medium size company in Northern Ireland, and it's really about how do we facilitate those companies that want to grow up to the next level. And I know that Invest Northern Ireland have been spending a good deal of time around that. But to be honest with you, David, there are some companies that don't want to grow. They want to stay in a very comfortable space. They are often they're family businesses, and they're facilitating those family members, providing them with a good standard of living, and they don't want to take the risk to go to the next level because they could lose it all. And of course, having come through a worldwide recession and all of the risks associated with that, there are many companies now in Northern Ireland which are risk averse, and they don't want to take that chance. So we have to try and say that taking a calculated risk is good for business, and we shall try and provide and facilitate them. And as you know, Invest Northern Ireland has provided a lot of different mechanisms whereby they can take funding out that isn't maybe as risky as taking bank loans and what have you, and that has been, I think, quite successful as well.
I mean, this Assembly term was probably the first that we have had since devolution returned to Northern Ireland that actually took place in a time of bust as opposed to a time of boom. And therefore, it was always going to be a challenging environment to be working in. But would I be right in assuming, Deputy First Minister mentioned a few minutes ago about the manufacturing industry, that there are more people working in manufacturing today than there was in 2007, 2008. would it be fair to say that that transfers in equal measure then over to the SME side of the House as well, in that there are more SMEs operating now in Northern Ireland than what there would have been at the start of this Assembly term?
Just before you answer, members, I do understand that the two ministers have an overarching responsibility for the programme for government, but I think we are pretty much into Eddie territory here, so I think we will allow the ministers to answer as they wish.
I'll let the FM answer then, if that's the case.
Well, I mean, we've had the conversation about the fact that whenever this present term of the Assembly began, we were straight into a world economic downturn, which was the worst that the world had ever seen. And there was hardly any country in Western Europe that weren't very seriously affected by that. So I think to record the success that we did in terms of foreign direct investment was pretty phenomenal. But I think at the beginning of that process, obviously SMEs were, hurting very badly. And that's why we took a decision, for example, to keep business rates down, to try and encourage as many people as possible to keep their businesses going. But I think there is a sense within the SME sector now that we are decisively coming out of that recession. And I think morale is better than it has been for an awful long time. We still have a way to go. But even, looking at my own constituency in Mid-Ulster, headline in the Mid-Ulster Mail just a few weeks ago, hundreds of new businesses have started up in the constituency. So I think we're in a healthy enough place, but not complacent about the future.
And I do thank the Chairman for his direction, but perhaps if I could maybe then come back to the reason I did raise it, which I think is quite relevant. Obviously, where there is successes and where there have been successes, which clearly from what I'm hearing, this is one of them, how do we ensure that that is a foundation stone of the next programme for government to ensure that those successes that have been achieved are not just continued but are actually built upon in order to sort of try and take it to the next level?
And I think you make a very fair point, because sometimes when we achieve a success, we say, well, that's been achieved, and set it to one side, and trying to say, well, that has been achieved, how do we build on that for the next programme for government? And it would be of no surprise to you, firmly believe that the economy and economic development, and I take what the Chair says about your question, but if that is not at the heart of the programme for government moving forward, then a whole lot of other things don't happen as well. Because if we have economic development in a sustainable way regionally across Northern Ireland, then that will be of benefit to everyone, because if people have jobs and they can do so many things and develop in such a positive way. So for me, economic development and growing the economy in Northern Ireland has to be at the heart moving forward.
I do accept you're perfectly entitled to ask these questions. Of course, you have a fantastic opportunity coming up again next week. You will be representing Northern Ireland in Washington during St. Patrick's Week. You will have, as the Americans, I think, say, FaceTime with the President, the Vice President, the Speaker. You'll host a breakfast in Washington. A fantastic opportunity to sell Northern Ireland and generate more foreign direct investment. How difficult is it going to be, given your two separate stances on the UK's continuing membership of the European Union?
It's not going to be difficult at all. We're very much looking forward to going out and talking about what has happened in Northern Ireland, the fact that we have a fresh start, the fact that we are very positively looking to the future. And whatever about the 23rd of June, the 24th of June will come, and Northern Ireland will still be here, and we will still have a job of work to do. And we take that very seriously, and that's the message that we're bringing out to the United States of America.
Well, I mean, obviously there's going to be a debate about this over the course of the next number of months, and people have strongly held views about it. Others are probably wondering what their position should be and haven't made up their minds, and all our parties have been quite decisive about where they stand. So I respect everybody's position in relation to this matter, although I do have to say that whenever Peter and I went to the United States during that time, and we were phenomenally successful in attracting foreign direct investment, as many people know who are in jobs. The question did always come up from these businesses as to whether or not there would be a referendum and what the consequences of an opt-out of Europe would be. So, I mean, we'd be foolish not to recognise that it probably will be an issue for the business community, but, you know, we're going there with, you know, a very good message about Fresh Start Agreement, about our ability to work together, about our determination to ensure the continued economic success of not just the administration, but more importantly, the people that we represent. And the way I look at it, the referendum will be over on the 23rd of June. And we'll deal with the aftermath of that when it comes. But if you look at, for example, the fact that we did attract foreign direct investment at a time when we didn't have a lower rate of corporation tax, you know, and we need to remember that during that 4 or 5 year period, we still were attached to the 20-odd% that London had. But we still managed to attract foreign direct investment. Of course, the assessment made by InvestNI was that if we had a lower rate, that would accelerate. And obviously, all of these things have to be taken into account. But I think when we go there, we will go with a very united message about being open for business and about the ability that we have as political leaders to work together for the betterment of everybody.
Thanks, Maskey.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, First and Deputy First Minister and Junior Ministers. There's 2 issues I'd like to cover, and maybe if we could deal with the first one. The first one is really around TPUC, and then the second one, I will come back secondly around the victim. In terms of TPUC, I mean, obviously it's a major plank of the programme for government and the executive work. And this committee held our own inquiry on all that, and we engaged with quite a range of organisations and sectors. But could you kind of give us a sense of your hopes? I mean, because both the First and Deputy First Minister in your opening remarks referred to the last period of time, which was rather difficult and challenging, to say the least. I think sometimes we need to remind ourselves of that. So, against the backdrop of a very challenging political circumstance there was up until fairly recently, and obviously we've come along history, I very clearly view that the executive has a big responsibility to provide leadership, resources, programmes and so on, and furtherance of TPUC. But how do you say to others out there, including people around this table, we all have a collective responsibility to tackle the kind of long-standing contentious political issues that are out there and affect us all. I don't believe for one second that any political party or any executive can deliver a united community on its own. It requires a lot of other people putting their shoulder to the wheel. You'd like to comment on that, because I mean, when I heard people here working at the coalface telling me that they weren't sure how to define sectarianism, I just couldn't quite understand that at all. In fact, I don't accept it at all. You know, so just trying to get the point that clearly the executive has a big responsibility, but so do others. And how do we actually remind ourselves collectively that others do have responsibilities as well, including people out in the community?
I think there's been a lot of good work that has gone on, even at a time when this place wasn't in particularly good shape, I have to say. I have to pay tribute to the way in which the officials continued to work with very many groups right across Northern Ireland. And under TPUC, whether that was under the children and young people's part of it, and the marvellous work that has already been referenced in terms of the summer camps, and indeed United Youth as well, which I know Junior Minister Pengelly has been very much involved with, or whether it's around shared communities, urban villages, the advances that has been made there, some of the shared neighbourhoods works, the safe community work, and of course the cultural expression work. That has all been going on, and sometimes I think we forget about the good work that has been going on, because it's been going on quietly on the ground. And I've had a chance in the short period of time I've been in this office to see some of that good work, and certainly again we need to build on what has happened and continue, and to look at other opportunities to do more of that work, and certainly that's where my vision is, to try and build on what has been achieved thus far.
Well, I think that together building a united community strategy is very, very important for us moving forward. But I mean, I come from the school of thought that you can have all the strategies in the world. If we're not given political leadership, then we effectively are doing a great disservice to the most important people of all within our society, who are young people. And Arlene and I, we've just come from an event over at Mencap, and we were at an event earlier this morning, and everywhere we go we meet young people. The overwhelming majority of whom are hopeful and optimistic for the future. The number of young people who are involved in negative stuff within our society are few and far between. But there is a huge responsibility on us as political leaders not to undermine the TBUC programmes by not having the ability to work together and to build a better future for the people that we represent. And of course, people tried to tear us apart over the course of the last term of the Assembly, whether it be the attempts to kill, or the successful attempt to kill 2 soldiers at Antrim, the killing of police officers, the killing of prison officers, the flag protests, the situation up at Ardoyne. All of these situations are reported internationally, and they're bad news stories for us as we try to build a better future for our citizens. And I think that we all need to be very conscious of our responsibility to give strong, decisive leadership and to make it clear to those who would try to drag us back to the past that we're not going back to the past, that we are committed, even though we have our different ideologies and our different allegiances. Our greatest allegiance is one we can share, and that is to peace. So what we need to do is ensure that we continue to send out positive messages about our ability to work together, but also we need to complement that by ensuring that the TBUC strategy is working at all levels, whether it be the summer camps, the different other ways within the process that we bring young people together, the urban villages, the myriad of other issues within TBUC, which are all good and which, even at this early stage, you can see have been embraced wholeheartedly by everybody who has participated in them.
Thank you. Can I just finish off, Chair, on the second point there, which is around the victims? I mean, you mentioned meeting the Victims Forum this morning, and obviously there was a lot of issues dealt with in terms of legacy institutions and so on, but in terms of victims and survivors service, a period of difficulty in there, and obviously there was a lot of focus to try to get all that rectified. Could you give us a sense of your satisfaction at this moment in time around the services provided to victims?
Well, I mean, I think we always have to be aware that we're dealing with a wide range of groups and individuals, and therefore it's always a challenge. Can we do things better? Yes, we can always do things better. But I think the general feeling from those victims that I speak to is that the Victims and Survivors Service has really bedded down now. They have been given an early indication of their budget this year, and I accept there were difficulties last year in and around the budgetary process, and that caused difficulties for a lot of victims groups. They have been given the largest ever opening budget line this year with £14 million, and certainly the sense I get from the victim sector, and I'm probably leading myself out to be very strongly corrected, is that there's a general sense that things are moving in the right direction. There's a good integration between the Victims Commissioner, who we had a conversation with this morning, the Victims Forum and the Victims and Survivors Service. So they're all working together in a very strategic way. They're having a look at the strategy over today and tomorrow to see what it is they need to look at. Can they do things slightly better? But certainly my sense is that we're on the right road. It has taken us some time to get there, but that we're on the right road in the Victims and Survivors sector.
Thank you.
Okay. Megan Fearns next.
Thank you. I suppose in the week that's in it, it'd be remiss of me not to mention how great it is to see 3 strong, smart women, and of course yourself, Martin.
And a weak man.
Your words. But obviously your department has the massive responsibility of equality, and it would be the sense of some that while the pace is slow, we are getting there. So just with that in mind, there's 2 strategies in particular that I want to ask for an update on, and that is sector orientation strategy and also the racial equality strategy.
Well, certainly we have agreed the racial equality strategy, as you know, before Christmas. At the moment, we have asked the different departments to send us in their racial equality champions for each department. We're waiting on the feedback in respect of that, so that's up and running. As regards the sexual orientation strategy, it is my hope that that will be released before the end of the mandate so that we can have that dealt with, because we did give an undertaking that that would be dealt with.
Well, in terms of crisis that we've seen, I suppose, over the last number of years, we're coming to a head this year in relation to Syria and the Syrian refugees that we've taken in here. What's the latest on the second group that we're expecting to arrive?
Well, we're expecting the second group to be a group of around 60 odd people, some of whom are suffering from very traumatic conditions, and we're expecting them to arrive sometime around the beginning of next month, and the intention is that they will go to the northwest. So we're at a very advanced stage of preparations. Both Arlene and I were there to meet the first group when they arrived. Right? Jennifer and Emma were also there, and several other ministers from the executive, and that has gone fantastically well. All of the community and voluntary sector, the statutory agencies, government departments, everybody weighed in, and that has been a very successful integration of those people into our society. And this next group will be similarly well treated with every avenue to ensure their happiness and their peace of mind is dealt with in the context of the next number of weeks.
Do you think we could be doing more?
Well, I think that the European Union has been very severely criticised for the very low success rate that they have. We're only a very tiny percentage of the European Union. But I think from our perspective, we want to take in the groups in a way that we are not overstretching ourselves, and maybe by doing so, doing a disservice to people who would arrive here in big numbers.
51 Syrians came in before Christmas, and a population of 1.8 million, that is perhaps be characterised as not a lot of people. Have you any sense of any additional stress or strain that is putting on the statutory services?
I'm not aware of any particular stress and strain. We certainly have had no alarm bells rung with us. Obviously, we're under the UK-wide scheme. It's a Foreign and Commonwealth Office scheme. We're part of that scheme, so we have to work within that, and we do have very close liaison. But I have to say, I was very proud of our statutory agencies, and indeed all of the voluntary agencies who were involved when we went to meet those families. I think they just arrived a couple of days when we went to meet them, and even then the sense that they were content. And bear in mind, they'd come through a horrific time. Some of them had been in camps for 2 years, and yet they seemed to have fitted in very well, and we certainly haven't been made aware of any difficulties with the agencies.
Sorry, I'm sure it would have been reported back to us if there had been any difficulties, but there have been no reports whatsoever, and that doesn't surprise me, because we were absolutely full of admiration for the people who were there whenever we met them, because they were some of the most compassionate, caring people that you could hope. Great support from within the community, great support from the statutory agencies in the community and voluntary sector, and you always know when you look at the faces of people as to whether or not they feel at home and they feel content. And they were a very content group of 51 people with their children. It was really something to be proud of. And I think we need to keep being proud of ourselves, and the way we do that is to ensure that the next group of people that come are treated in a similar fashion, because of the very horrendous, traumatic circumstances that they've all come through with the war in their country.
I was approached by people who had a view that some of the refugees will have suffered long-term torture and therefore need psychological services that are not available in Northern Ireland. And I only mention it because I don't have an evidence base. But if you're saying that the next 60 may fall into that category, I would ask you simply to have that on your radar, that
Oh,
there
we-
may be
We absolutely do.
specific services that we
Yeah.
may need to access.
And we're very conscious of that.
Okay, thank you. Alex Edwards.
Thank you very much for attending. I may come back to that in a minute. Could I just start with the historical abuse and the various scoping reviews? So in March 2013, then Junior Minister Bell acknowledged that there was an issue for persons outside the Heart Inquiry. And then subsequently there was the scoping review commenced December 2013, and subsequent to that there was a further scoping review undertaken by senior civil servants in September 2014. So it's been nearly 3 years since the issue was identified, and many, many months. In Junior Pengelly's evidence, she said, quote, that one of the reasons why the new scoping exercise was being undertaken by the Department of Health was, quote, a lack of data and a lack of information. So that begs the question, does it not, that if these scoping reviews have been ongoing for years, why is it at the end of those scoping reviews that the committee has been told today that there's a lack of data and a lack of information?
Because I think simply, Alex, more people are coming forward. More people, and to myself, for example, I mean, they've come to my constituency office and I have been able to signpost them to officials in the department. The very specific scoping review is in terms of people who were in mother and baby homes who aren't covered now by the inquiry. As you know, the inquiry chairman widened his inquiry to take in some of those people. So we want to see who is it that has been left out? How do we deal with those people? And then in terms of the clerical abuse, what hasn't been covered by the inquiry to date? In other words, outside of institutions, where are there issues that we need to gather up? I mean, there's no mystery to this. Unfortunately, as this inquiry has developed, more and more has come before.
I appreciate that, but it's 27 months since the first scoping review, and it's 18 months since the second one began. I don't think it's the issue is a lack of data or lack of information. There may well be more data and more information coming on, but is, at the conclusion of those scoping reviews, is there some huge gap in terms of data and in terms of information? As was suggested by Minister Pengelly, surely there must have been much more certainty during the conduct of the two reviews, so that by now something more definitive could have been done other than referring the matter to the Department of Health.
Well, I think what we want to ensure, I mean, I'll let Junior Minister Pengelly answer for herself because she's been in the department in another role longer than I certainly have been. But what we're trying to do is, rather than trying to close matters down, is to make sure that we cover all bases and not miss people out. And unfortunately, and I think the HIA inquiry has been very inclusive, but even in terms of their terms of reference, they don't reach everybody, and we have to deal with that as a consequence. So, you know, we are trying to ensure that we are as inclusive as possible, and in doing that, we have more work to do. And I know that's frustrating. I'm not suggesting it's not, particularly for the victims. Particularly for the victims and survivors. I accept that.
After such a long time of two reviews, and if you speak to the victims and survivors who represent mother and child and clerical abuse, they have very firm figures. They may well be changing because people inevitably come forward as they're given confidence. But there are figures out there, and the point I'm making clearly is that after this length of time, I think there should have been more decisiveness in terms of what should or should not be done. And I don't think that an argument that it's a lack of data is actually the most compelling argument. And could I move on?
Well, that's fair enough, Alex, but what I'm saying to you is what we're trying to do is to work with the victims to ensure that all of the issues are dealt with and not as has happened in the past, when we think we've set up institutions to deal with something, that somebody comes along and says, well, actually, I was in another institution, I was abused elsewhere. So how do we answer that? So we are trying to be comprehensive in this, and I accept that that's frustrating. But again, I say to you, we didn't have normal politics last year. We just didn't. And therefore, things that perhaps should have been dealt with weren't dealt with.
And I'll ask you then the second question. The Deputy First Minister said that in all probability, the Heart Quarry would bring forward a compensation proposal. I think it's a bit more than all probability.
Yeah.
I think Judge Hart has said that he will bring that
Yeah, but
forward.
we don't want to preempt the...
Yeah, but the principle has been established.
Yeah.
He is bringing forward a recommendation. It is not a probability, it is a certainty, out of his own words. My question arising from that is, with all due regard and respect to the Heart Inquiry, and mindful of how long victims and survivors have been waiting, not least in respect of the 2 scoping reviews, would it not be wise to undertake work now in terms of options for compensation, not to do any prejudice to the work of the Heart Review or the Heart Inquiry, but in order to say to victims and survivors, for all the delays of the last 2 or 3 years, and before that, now things are going to move quickly?
Well, I think we're very much aware that some independent work has been done, and
About to be announced.
and it's about to be announced by Professor Lundy. We do, of course, want to see what that entails and what that involves, and we'll take receipt of that and give it very due consideration.
But do you not think...
You would be the first. This committee would be the first to come to us if we did a piece of work that was redundant when Judge Hart came forward and said, well, actually, whatever about all the work you've done, here's what I think should be done. I mean, we're obviously all aware that there are different models of redress and there's different ways to deal with the issues, and officials are very much aware of that. But I think
create some certainty in the minds of victims and survivors.
Well, I think they have that certainty when they hear what Judge Hart has said in relation.
They hear it from Judge Hart, yes, but
Yeah.
would it not create deepen the certainty if OFM and DFM now are in the programme for government, and this is the view of the committee, agreed unanimously at last week's meeting, that there would be a commitment to a compensation scheme?
Yeah, but I think we have to take into consideration that whenever Anthony Hart makes his recommendations, and I accept what you're saying, probably shouldn't have used the word probability, but the reality is that there is going to be a recommendation for redress. But who will he apportion the liability for that redress to? And how much of it would fall on the executive, this administration? How much of it will fall on other institutions? That's the complicating factor.
Yeah, accept there's complicating factors, but scoping out what the options are, working those options against the numbers of people involved, looking for an interim scheme as there was in the rest of Ireland before there was a primary scheme. I think victims and survivors, and that's the view of the committee, say that that should be a commitment entered into now, and I'd ask you to consider that further. Can I ask you a third question? If all the work heretofore has been undertaken by OFM and DFM, why is the work now being given to the Department of Health? In terms of Mary Magdalene and
Oh, it's not all been given, they're just leading on it. It's not just
why
a
is FM and DFM not leading, having led all the way on this? Why is now Health leading on that bespoke piece of work? Because it seems to be incongruous
the
that FM and DFM are done all so far, but are not doing this piece hereafter.
Well, first of all, the Safeguarding Board is a arm's length body of health. So that was the Safeguarding Board was one of the ones in terms of the clerical abuse. It's an interdepartmental group has been set up, which is similar to the task force that was set up before the HIA inquiry was set up. So I think that there is the reason in terms of the health is because the Safeguarding Board that's where it sits, and obviously the Safeguarding Board did a piece of work and they have the expertise of that in times, if you remember the issue in and around the young people in care homes, so they would have the expertise in that, and that's why the Safeguarding Board, it was felt that was best placed to put that piece of work into.
And I hear that argument in part accepted. It does seem to be in the face of it some incongruity. But the committee also said that at the end of 6 months, this is from last week, that there would be a commitment to a compensation scheme. Why is the work now being given to the Department of Health?
Well,
that at the end of 6 months, paper should go to the executive and a decision taken within 2 months of that. Would that be the sort of time frame that you're working to? That a paper goes to executive within 6 months? Or sorry, the paper comes out in 6 months and the decisions are made by the executive within 2 months thereafter? Because I think victims and survivors who were here earlier want that sense of dynamic and good authority.
And I think it's right that the committee takes a very close interest in relation to this matter, particularly given the way in which victims have interacted with the committee. And yes, there is a time scale of 6 months for the work to be carried out by the Department of Health, and if that slips for whatever reason, I think the committee needs to be made aware of that so that they can challenge and ask questions around why that is the case. But yes, it is 6 months.
I think the committee has a view that's more precise than any slippage being...
No, but I'm just saying if there are. And
a separate question. PFG commitment 38 at one of 13 OFMDFM commitments extend age discrimination legislation to provision of goods, facilities and services. I've only got one question. When the Children's Commissioner was here a few weeks ago, I don't want to put words into her mouth because she wouldn't congratulate me, but I think she's quite forthright in her views on that issue about extending anti-discrimination legislation to persons under 16. And your officials, and I have to say this about officials, more and more in the mandate, they've been more and more forthcoming to the committee. I want to acknowledge that because once or twice I might give them a bit of a hard time, but they have been more forthcoming, and probably some people not very far away from you at the moment in that regard. But it's clear that whilst papers mightn't have gone to FM and DFM in this matter so far, it's clear that the consultation is very strongly in favour of extending to under 16s. I think that's the view of one of you. Is it the view now of the other?
I will wait until the consultation proposals come to me.
But you're First Minister and
Yes.
the Deputy First Minister is always talking about leadership. Is this not a time just to say, look, we're going to do this?
Look, Alex, I've been in this job for 2 months,
all the young people
and I have been.
how wonderful they are, and you're right.
Yeah.
So let's treat them as people entitled to protection.
Well, let's also treat matters with due process, and let's see what has to be said.
Could I move on from that and ask you this question? One of the things I've been picking up is that I was with Alistair Hamilton this morning, for example. I don't think I'm going to breach the confidence. And he was talking in more affirmative terms about the PFG process at the moment. And I've picked that up in one or two places, that there is a more coherent process around the PFG. And obviously we're going to have these 14 days afterwards in respect to the PFG. Can I ask you this question? If you go and look at the Scottish example, John Swinney, as you know him better than me, and I'm sure you both have a very high opinion of him, much as me, but he has built in a social partnership model into the life of the Scottish Government in respect of the relationship between the Government and the unions. And there's been models of that in the South. There was a social partnership model that then went, and then there was various other subsequent agreements. Is it not time to build into the life of the PFG a rigorous parallel or integrated process that, for among other people, involves the unions? Given how the unions and the people they represent, especially at the lower wage level, have been the people who've most, not exclusively, but in many instances have carried a very heavy burden because of the pain of austerity. Is it not time to actually have, if not a social partnership model, which is what I would prefer?
Well, Arlene and I met with the unions yesterday. Yesterday. And I think we absolutely agree that in terms of the bringing together of a programme for government, and that work will continue over the course of the next couple of months. And as you rightly say, in the aftermath then of the election, in that 14-day period before ministers are appointed, there will have to be an agreement, a conclusion to those discussions on the programme for government. But we do see a role for the unions, and we do think that that it's very, very important that we, on an ongoing basis, have a much closer working relationship with the trade unions. We've both committed ourselves to do that in the time ahead. And I think we also need to remember that we have learned lessons from the Scottish model in terms of how they put their programme for government together, and indeed some of their people have been very proactively involved with us in terms of the work that we're presently undertaking to put our programme for government together.
I mean, Sir John Elveridge has been involved in terms of the process, and I think that's working very well. Martin's right, we had a very good meeting with a wide range of trade unionists yesterday. But you are also right to say from among other people, because there are many others that we need to engage with. We are doing that. Because I've always said that government doesn't have all the wisdom. We very much need to listen to what's been said outside. And indeed, on one occasion over this past 12 months, the unions have brought forward a solution in terms of how you deal with a budgetary problem, and that solution has worked very well. So, I mean, that has worked for us. And we will engage with them in the future, as indeed we will with the business communities and with with the voluntary sector as well.
Certainly my experience in government was that you very much got answers from the unions. They were tough with you, but you got answers. But I'm really arguing more, not about a relationship, but something that's formalised and institutionalised. And moreover, it's also my view, for what it is worth, that until we bring in the external world into the life of government and populate government departments, whatever sectors they might be, poverty, human rights, business, trade unions, then actually you won't have the fully dynamic government that we have. Can I ask you a question? In relation to the answer you gave to Megan, you confirmed about where you are in respect of the racial equality strategy and the sexual orientation strategy, but you didn't say anything, or you weren't asked, but you did say anything in respect of the anti-poverty strategy. So here we are 9 months since CIJ High Court JR, where we have a situation where poverty is deepening because of the welfare, among other factors. Child poverty figures could be, in real and absolute terms, above 30%. And at the end of this mandate, we won't have an anti-poverty strategy when the figures are so acute, so critical. Do you regret not having that in place as we end this mandate?
Well, I think Jennifer's going to bring you up to date as to where we are. Obviously, we are complying with the judgment of the court. As you know, we believed as a department that in terms of the anti-poverty strategy, that was being dealt with through the framework approach that we had taken. The court decided otherwise, and we have to accept that that is the case. And that being so, the officials have been working very hard to bring forward proposals in relation to anti-poverty strategy, and Jennifer can bring you up to date as to where we are.
Just before Jennifer comes in, do you regret that at the end of this mandate, after 5 years, that there is not an anti-poverty strategy in place?
Well, as I said, Alex, we took the view that we were dealing with anti-poverty through another mechanism. The court took a different view, so it's not as if we weren't dealing with those issues. And I have to say, I always take the view, and you've heard me say this before, that it's not about the strategies, it's about the interventions, and it's about the actions that we take to deal with the issues. And if you're asking me, do I accept that we haven't been tackling poverty? We have been tackling poverty through a wide range of programmes, and that, I think, is the important issue. But Jennifer will bring you up to date with the strategy.
I mean, obviously, an anti-poverty strategy based on objective need was what the court said, and that's obviously what we're working towards. Officials have been engaging, because you mentioned earlier, and I think it was even in terms of any strategy that we have, you know, is only as good as the paper it's written on, unless there's actually delivery at the other end of it. But also, I think that when we are devising any strategy, whether it's the racial equality strategy, the gender equality strategy, or whatever, it's important that we have a new way of working, that we have that consultation first. And you know, and we've had a number of consultations in terms of the gender equality strategy and the racial equality strategy, and indeed the anti-aging strategy as well, or the active aging strategy, if there was an anti-aging strategy. But
I'd like that.
I always call that.
I'm all for the anti-aging.
I think that in terms of this one here, we have to engage, because it's very, very clear that we need to reflect the concerns of those who brought forward the judicial review in the first place, because there's a very, very, very robust sort of opinion out there, and I think that in terms of objective need, need, and that anti-poverty strategy needs to be based on an objective need, as people have said. So our officials are now engaging with people who the stakeholders are in terms of bringing that piece of work forward.
I think also, and probably you know better than most, that this is a department completely different from all other departments, where you have to get agreement on how to take things forward. And we don't always get agreement. In most things we certainly do. But you've identified one of the issues where there was a
So it was
difference
your
of
common
opinion.
position, Deputy First Minister, that the programme for government was the anti-poverty strategy.
Yeah.
That was the instructions that you gave to your barristers in the JR. So therefore, whilst there may be difference, be the same instructions to the barrister.
And to be clear, there's no disagreement in relation to us bringing forward an anti-poverty strategy. That's exactly what
The real reason I highlighted is that I think there's a catastrophic situation arising in respect to child poverty. And if you read any of the narrative about the poverty groups in Britain in terms of the welfare changes that have been and are yet to come, and there's going to be even more on the far side of the bill that's going through Westminster at the moment that we are now subject to, in terms of social security provisions, there's a catastrophic situation arising with respect to child poverty, and that was, I think, the flavour of the evidence given by the Children's Commissioner when she was here a couple of weeks ago. Could I just ask two very quick, very quick. Sorry.
It's all relative.
I've speeded up remarkably in the last while, I think.
All those in favour?
It just shows you how bad you were.
That could be true as well. So I'll get this over the line very quickly. I think I'll say to you, First Minister, I think it's a very benign interpretation that when you read the report that came out from the University of Ulster today in respect of corporation tax, where they made the important point that economic circumstances are very important for the benefit of corporation tax to accrue, that somehow economic circumstances around in or out of the European Union doesn't have an impact here, and very possibly a disproportionate impact here. Given that we are on the margins of Europe and given the economic circumstances we face here, I think it is very benign to say that, well, it'll be okay on the night.
It's not what I said, Alex. And as you well know, Invest Northern Ireland and myself spent many times going out on trade missions, and we spent very little of that time in Europe. We spent most of our time in new and emerging markets, and that's where the focus is, and that's where I think we're right to have that focus. We don't agree, the Deputy First Minister and myself, on the way forward in terms of the European Union. I think we have to reflect the fact that we all have differing views. However, this is a referendum, and people will make the decision, not parties. Parties won't make the decisions, people will make the decisions, and so everyone have to make their own determination as to what's best for Northern Ireland and the United Kingdom, importantly, in the future. I've made my determination known, the Deputy First Minister has made his determination known, and we now deal with that.
I think also we all recognise that in the course of the debate that will ensue over the next number of months, it'll be mostly an economic debate, and for us, I think it's probably very fortunate that it's not going to be fought along nationalist, Republican, Unionist lines. So as Arlene has said, right across the different parties, there'll be different views. And everybody, I think, awaits with considerable interest that debate. The complicating factor for us is it's coming in the middle of an Assembly election campaign, and as the committee will know, Arlene and I wrote jointly with the First Minister of Scotland and the First Minister of Wales to ask the Prime Minister to not have it in such close proximity to the Assembly elections. But he disregarded the three administrations and went ahead. And that does, I think, present a problem for us in terms of the Assembly elections.
Could I just finish then? Just two questions to the Deputy First Minister.
Well, it was two a minute ago.
Well, it's double header. And the first is the Victims and Survivors Victims Commissioner said this morning that, and the media have concentrated on the question of national security, that there shouldn't be any rock under which anything should be hidden. But the same interview, she said that there shouldn't be any excuse for cooperation with the HIU and the ICIR. And I think that the fact that she made both points was very important, because whilst we think there's many issues yet to be resolved in the legacy negotiations, those are two. The issue of cooperation with the ICIR and generally by people in state and non-state organisations, and the issue of national security. Do you agree with that?
Well, I absolutely agree with the negotiation that we all went through to establish the mechanisms and the structures. And the purpose of doing that was obviously not to have them sitting like ivory towers, not being used by the public. I think they will be used by the public, and I think there will be a duty and a responsibility on everybody who can assist victims who are seeking the truth to cooperate with those mechanisms and structures, and I would encourage people to do that.
Beyond encouragement, in order to create certainty for victims and survivors about an ICIR process that is proposed to be voluntary, do you accept that there should be principles established now about obligations upon people who may have information, and their obligations in respect of responding to the family's request for information through the ICIR, taking it beyond encouragement to actually creating some level of certainty so that victims and survivors can hopefully have some information that brings some better sense of healing or closure to their case?
Well, I suppose it's working out the balance between it being a voluntary process and one that compels people, and I presume that's what you're hinting at. And that could actually, well, even a hybrid could actually work against the relatives who wish to access ICIR for the purposes of gaining the truth about what happened to their loved one.
Final, I don't think you don't have to respond to this one, Martin, but
you're going to ask it.
I'm going to ask it. Do you think your reference to the economy in the North being in a healthy enough place was a variation on the political slogan, "Recovery is working for you"?
Oh, I think that's a silly comment. What I was talking about when I was asked a question about the state of SMEs, and I made reference to what was happening in my own constituency, that I thought SMEs and others within the business community recognised that we were coming out of the downturn, but that there was still a long way to go. I think what you've just done is misrepresent what I've said.
Thank you very much.
I presume quite deliberately so.
We move on to the Deputy Chair, Chris Little.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks very much for your comments so far, Ministers. Genuinely good to see you here. I think that's reflected in the wide range of questions that have come forward. In fairness to the department, you have an extremely wide portfolio. I will try my best not to do an Atwood and be as concise as I can with my questions. I mean that as affectionately as possible, Alex. I start by agreeing with the First Minister that I think the vast majority of people in Northern Ireland do want to see devolved government work, and Peter Robinson previously said that this mandate had to be judged by delivery. So whilst ongoing stability is of course to be welcome, we do need to see progress, and we have seen some progress. As somebody that's passionate about community relations, we do have a community relations strategy in place. I'm on record, my party's on record in terms of our perceived inadequacy of it, but there is a community relations strategy in place. There are additional 40,000 people into work since 2010, and we have seen the evolution of policing and justice, which has brought more and more people behind supporting policing and justice in Northern Ireland, and further isolating those people that would seek to destabilise us on those grounds. We also had the good news that Belfast is the best UK city according to the Guardian Travel Awards recently, so I think that's something to be positive about. But I do think for many people that the pace of progress is too slow, and there are issues that we need to address. So to look at some of the PFG targets in that respect, the target for PFG Commitment 33 in relation to a childcare strategy was by 2015 to have published and implemented a childcare strategy with key actions and to have achieved expenditure of what I think was a £12 million budget. My understanding is that we're close, but we have not yet published the childcare strategy, and we expended around 4 million of a £12 million budget, and we have achieved 2,000 out of approximately 7,000 targeted childcare places. So is there any update as to why that particular target hasn't progressed faster?
Well, I mean, first of all, you're right in saying the childcare strategy will be out soon. In terms of, we know Bright Start, and you mentioned some figures are about 4 million. There's actually been 4.2 million to date has been spent, and also there's been a further 3 million profiled up to 18-19. So obviously, and that's before the strategy is actually out there. So we believe that will actually rise quite substantially once the strategy is out there. As you know, Chris, and I mean, I've had meetings with you on this, but we had looked at bringing the Bright Start childcare first actions forward, and it was school-age childcare which seemed to be the biggest gap, and that was from 4 to 14. So basically, that was where our 15 first actions we're going to be looking at, and that included creating the places for the social economy sector, rural childcare for children with disabilities, and those extra places within that. And we did create, in terms of our strategy, was to sustain or create 5,000, as you said, and 7,000 school-age childcare places. So between those two, basically, with the daycare settings, 3,000 of them in disadvantaged areas, 2,000 to 3,000 in new schemes in the schools estate, and then the 1,000 in rural areas. Now that is a big piece of work to undertake from having no strategy, if you like, but I think that really, you know, and when I'm out and about and I visit it regular, you know, childcare settings and provision, there are issues in and around the 25%, for instance, in disadvantaged areas. There are issues there that we're going to have to look at, but certainly to date, the spend being 4.2 million and then the other 3 million actually being profiled, I think that we're seeing it being rolled out. We're seeing it, obviously. If you're going to say, is it perfect? No, it isn't perfect. We would rather have more money to be able to actually have a childcare place for every child that needs it. But certainly, I think that what we're doing is two sort of dual things here, is we're providing childcare for parents that need it, that are working, but we're also providing childcare for children maybe who come from disadvantaged backgrounds or who live in deprived areas, so that their development, because we all know that the earlier a child goes into that setting where other children in a play setting or a childcare provision setting, that it actually gets those children on a ladder, if you like, for future for their future lifetime opportunities. And you know, it makes them realise their potential more, their talents and their skills as well. So all of that's all part of the whole childcare strategy that we're trying to roll out, but we're certainly looking at all different aspects of it. So in terms of to date, I think that while, you know, some people have criticised us for being slow to date, I think that the fact that we have got out there what we have got out there, will be also in the next number of weeks be releasing the summer scheme, the Bright Start summer scheme through health in terms of children with disabilities. So all that is even quickened up in pace. So I think that really, you know, we're going forward there, and we are doing, you know, what we said we would do in the draft strategy.
Okay, and will you be working to ensure that there are robust, updated targets in terms of childcare strategy in the next programme for government then?
Certainly. I mean, I think that everybody has said, and even, you know, I mean, when you go around any department or any party, childcare is a priority for the executive. It's an executive strategy, and we would certainly be keen to see that priority maintained in any. Obviously, I haven't got the things of doing what's going into the programme for government and what isn't, but certainly I think there's a commitment there from ministers to see it as a priority, yes.
Do you have any influence over the budget that will be allocated for childcare in terms of the next years? We're hearing that in order to actually roll out the childcare strategy, significant budgets are going to be required, and at this moment in time it's approximately £3 million per year. So is there work, you know, what work is being done to ensure that there's adequate budget in place, given, like you say, this in terms of family bills, I think this is second only to mortgage for most people?
Yeah, no, and I totally agree. I mean, and I think that also in terms of whenever we looked at delivering social change, we did put the 12 million at that time aside for childcare and for the strategy going forward. So I think that you know, you quite rightly say, you know, childcare is a substantial amount of money for parents that are working. So we want to make sure that both, you know, both are looked after, that it's there for parents that need it, the quality, affordable childcare, I think, and that's the key to it. I think that it is affordable, but I also think that in terms of the child's development as well, and we have to factor in some children, you know, for whatever reason, need that, you know, that setting there, that provision as well, and that's why we're looking to sort of complement the social economy sector, and that's why the social economy sector was one of the first places that we looked at, because again, there was a gap in areas of deprivation and disadvantage as well in childcare, you know, and the rural community and children with disabilities. So we were trying to identify the gaps and then put the money into and the resources into where that was needed.
Okay, and I think obviously areas of social need are extremely important to target, but it is welcome that I believe there is some provision for support for private provision in the next strategy as well. I suppose in leaving that particular issue, private providers that I've been speaking to and working with would ask the executive to keep the issue of the increase in the living wage in mind in terms of how that's going to affect their costs, and also they're keen to hear how a potential increase in free childcare and GB would either have a bar net consequential here in Northern Ireland or a similar policy here in Northern Ireland, if that's something you can bear in mind. Moving from children and young people to older people, I know many of the ministers engage strongly with the Pensioners Parliament, and I was privileged to be there myself again yesterday. One issue you've covered, anti-age discrimination legislation to a certain extent. I suppose briefly on that, I would ask, given the strength of the consultation and the strength of the evidence that we received to say that the exemptions that are the legitimate exemptions that are needed for children can be delivered, why was it not possible to deliver that legislation with the inclusion of under 16s, the inclusion of all ages prior to the end of this mandate?
Well, you will, I mean, just in the previous conversation, you will be aware that in terms of the policy decision or the policy of that, there was a difference of opinion. There, I mean, I think everybody around this table, there's nobody under any illusion there was a difference of opinion on that, and also I think the wider community knew there was a difference of opinion. And while, you know, the compromise situation obviously we were looking at was under or over 16, but when we went out to consultation on that, as you said, there were some very challenging recommendations coming back from people who represent the younger people sector, and then that went to the Equality Commission, and you'd be aware that there is the Children's Commissioner and the Children's Law Centre both have approached the Equality Commission, and we're waiting to see, you know, the outcome of that. But, you know, obviously that's the reason.
Okay.
That's the reason.
Do you think it's something that can be progressed promptly in the new mandate?
Well, it's something that we have to continue to work on. Obviously, I mean, that's another issue where there's a different view. Everybody's obviously entitled to their own opinion, but I think that we have to continually seek in these to reach as much agreement as we possibly can.
Fair enough. One other issue in terms of older people is fuel poverty, obviously. It's a fairly stark statistic shows that in the winter of 12-13, 550 people 65 and older died from coal-related illness. Another issue that was raised at the Pensioners Parliament was the issue of the Warm Homes Discount Scheme. My understanding is that that scheme is in effect an £11, £12 per annum addition onto energy bills that could then save older people on pension credit somewhere in the region of £140 per annum. The scheme applies in GB, but it hasn't applied in Northern Ireland. Is that a scheme that can be applied to Northern Ireland?
Well, that would be a matter essentially for the Energy Division of DEFI to have engagements with the various power companies and all of the stakeholders around that. It has never been introduced here, and actually when there was discussion about it across the water, we did receive a wide range of members of Parliament actually writing to us about it when it didn't actually apply here. We have a different way of levying. There's another levy that comes out, and then it comes out by way of renewable support. In terms of the fuel poverty issue, obviously those figures you're quoting are 12, 13. The price of oil has reduced considerably. We would hope that that will have some impact in relation to those figures. However, we will of course continue to engage with all of the different bodies that represent pensioners, not least the Pensioners Parliament. I know you said you engaged with them. I'm quite sure they engage with you in a very efficient way. I have found, and they're very good advocates for their cause, and we'll continue to engage with them.
Okay, and in terms of historical institutional abuse, it's been covered, so to try and focus in, can OFMDFM give any level of commitment to equity for victims of clerical abuse in mother and baby homes, in terms of if the working groups recommend inquiries, can they be given that level of equity with the historical institutional abuse that's ongoing, inquiry that's ongoing at the moment?
There's an awful lot of ifs in that question, because if you don't mind me saying so, I think we have to wait, and I know that's not a phrase people like, but we do need to give people the space to do the work and to bring it back to us.
And then consider very carefully how we take it forward. Yeah.
Okay. In terms, you touched on social investment in your responses. As a member of the steering group, people have raised concerns in terms of access to information. So I suppose as a member of the committee, can I ask First and Deputy First Minister to give assurances that all appropriate governance and economic appraisal processes are being followed, and that funding allocations are being made on the pure basis of quality of project and its ability to deliver outcomes?
Well, absolutely, and that's why some of them have taken a little bit longer, because we've had to keep going back to get economic appraisals and then bringing them back to the economists, and that has caused a great deal of frustration. And I know this committee has been in the past critical of the speed by which the money has been able to get out there, but if we don't comply with proper governance and accountability, then there are consequences for that, and our officials are very much aware of that. So it is frustrating. It has been slower, but I think it is now starting to make a real difference, and I can see that in my own region as well as right across Northern Ireland.
Yeah. And is it something that you see significant rapid progress on in the next mandate, given how delayed it has been to date?
No, I think it's around 61 at the end of February in terms of millions attributed to programmes and to capital funds. That should rise, we hope, to at least 70 million by the end of March in terms of that. So then it'll be in a delivery process, and that will happen very quickly, we would hope.
Could I ask, Deputy Chair, if I'm reading the latest briefing from the department correctly, the 80 million will be spent by financial year 2019-20?
No, we expect to have the 80 million allocated to SIF committed by the end of the summer 2016.
But the question was spend, not allocated?
Yes, spend.
Yeah, well, that will really be down to the ability to process all of that, consistent with the priorities that the different advisory groups pose. But I mean, what we all have to recognise that this was a new scheme. It was an innovative scheme. It's a scheme that's going to make a huge difference to communities all over the north. And I think, given that we accept that there were unfortunate delays, with a view to getting things right and ensuring that the money was being properly spent and not going awry, I think that we can learn the lessons from this first experiment and apply them to future schemes if we agree that this should continue on.
Your briefing, which members is at page 29 of your pack, says SIF will be extended beyond the current programme for government period. All projects are expected to be operational by 2019-20.
Yes.
So the money will be on the ground.
Yes.
Oh, absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, as you know, programmes usually start in year one. There's not a big spend. Year two, there's a bigger spend, and then it goes back down again, and there's a little spend. So yes, absolutely, 1920.
Sorry, Chris.
Okay. Only a few more questions. it may technically be more fresh start than OFMDFM necessarily, but is it possible to provide any level of update with regards to a strategy for tackling all manifestations of paramilitarism in our society?
Yes, we have had a very good engagement with the panel recently. We hope to have their report by the end of May, or whoever's in this office will have that report by the end of May. They are engaging widely, gathering information at this present moment in time, and I have every confidence that they will deliver that report in that period of time.
Yeah, we've met with the panel. I think they're a good panel. I think they're very focused on what needs to be done. They're people with, a wide range of experience in terms of the situation here in the north, and I have to say I'm very impressed by the way that they have not just presented their work to us in the initial period, but the very wide range of people that they're engaging with, stakeholders within society.
And is this something that will be a priority issue for the Executive Office in the next mandate then, to add any resource?
It has to be a priority for all of us. I mean, the only reason these institutions stay together over the course of the last mandate and for several years beyond that, particularly since the killing of the 2 soldiers in 2009 in Antrim, was the ability of all political parties in this executive to stay together and to send a very clear message to those on the extremes of wherever that we are not going to tolerate under any circumstances the bringing down of these institutions or the continuing criminal activity that they have been involved in over that period.
I think that's something that will be welcomed by the vast majority of people in our community. In terms of some other issues connected to a number of negotiation processes in recent times, there's obviously plans to establish the Flags Commission. Is it possible to provide an update in relation to that? I know the Flags Protocol, I think, has been under review for some years, but do you see a robust system coming forward to allow us to deal with the removal of paramilitary flags and some type of protocol or regulation of unofficial display of flags as well?
Well, as you know, we put out an advertisement for independent members. That is now closed. We have 135 applications under that. We wrote out to the different political parties for their nominees. We have received 2 back, as I understand it. I think we're still awaiting the SDLP's nomination. So that is progressing well, and we hope to have that Flags Commission in place in the appropriate time.
Okay. Can I ask one last question in terms of ministerial attendance then? We are where we are in terms of attendance and engagement with the committee on this occasion. I had previously written to the office to ask whether the office thought it would be possible for quarterly attendance of ministers, given that there are, as far as I'm aware, senior civil servant quarterly updates in relation to programme for government. We as a committee were discussing what we thought would be a more constructive frequency of attendance and engagement. Do you have your own ideas in terms of what is a fair expectation in a session of a committee? Is it quarterly? Is it once a session? It's a genuine question.
Well, really it's a matter for the new First Minister and Deputy First Minister to answer. But certainly from my view, I would welcome the opportunity to come as regularly as is efficient and effective, frankly. There's no point in us coming for the sake of it, but at the same time, if there are genuine questions to be asked and if genuine information needs to be imparted, then I have no difficulty with coming on a regular basis if I'm in that office.
I think we can have a discussion about that, and I have the same attitude as the First Minister. Absolutely no difficulty whatsoever coming here with whatever regularity people require.
And we should get into a more regular pace in the new mandate and set off as we mean to go on.
But all that's in the hands of the electorate, folks.
Certainly is indeed. Hopefully we've displayed to you today that there are substantive issues that we want to engage with beyond, and the next, as you say, it will be for the next committee and the next set of ministers to continue that. But hopefully we've set a tone to do that for the next mandate. Thanks, Chair. Thank you.
Hey, Chris Hazard.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Ministers, for the answers thus far. Suppose I could maybe ask for an update on the gender equality strategy, specifically perhaps in relation to issues relating to the past and the legacy issues. At this committee in recent months, officials from the VSS have remarked that they probably didn't pay enough deference to gender analysis and a gender lens when it was dealing with the past. So I just want to know, when you are providing an update perhaps on the gender equality strategy, to what extent will legacy issues be part of that strategy?
And it's good that you asked that, because just this morning Commissioner made reference to gender issues in dealing with the past. So obviously it's on the agenda in terms of Commission and the Victims Forum. They have started now to think about issues in that respect as well. So I think that is something that we should give consideration to in the gender strategy. But Jennifer, do you know where precisely we are in terms of?
In terms of that and dealing with the past, the gender equality strategy in general, there was a draft strategy put out, as you know, and they're now getting the comments and the consultation back from that. I was at a meeting in Cookstown about 2 or 3 weeks ago, and it was a meeting of the Gender Advisory Panel, but there was more than just the Gender Advisory Panel at that meeting, and it was a sense of engagement. And I have to say that the officials are being very robust in the way that they are engaging with the sector on this. But just in terms of the gender principles, there is a group that has been set up and has been taken forward because there was a criticism about looking at the dealing with the past with a specific gender lens on it, just given the very fact that women were probably impacted there in terms of most of the people that were killed during the conflict were men. So obviously you had partners, you had mothers and sisters and that there, and this group sort of felt that they needed that need to be looked at. And there has been a number of meetings. I have went to one myself, which most of the negotiators that were dealing with the past were at the meeting, and I know that they were looking to take that forward, and that all parties would take on board the pamphlet that they released on the gender principles and dealing with the legacy of the past. So I think that obviously we had factored that in also when we were talking. Our people had factored that into the officials, so that's part of the engagement process as well. They have met with those people as well. So all that there is getting, the engagement, and whatever's coming out of those engagements is all getting, looked at in terms of, when we are taking the final strategy forward. That will all be hopefully looked at and put into that.
There was a very important book launched in Derry the other night, which was organised, I think, by the Craigan Area Partnership, and it's basically the stories of women who had lost loved ones as a result of the conflict and how that had impacted on them and their families. So it's from the perspective of women. It's actually free of charge, I'm told, so it would be a very important book for everybody to read who are concerned about the issue of gender equality and how that impacted on legacy issues.
Can I ask now then about what success have we had in achieving more diversity in public appointments over the last 4 or 5 years, and going forward, how do we ensure, especially those, thinking as well the transgender issue, also going forward, how do we make sure it's even more diverse?
Well, I think there's an acceptance that there's not enough diversity, and yesterday Arlene and I met with Judina Leslie, who is the new Public Appointments Commissioner, and I think within a very short period of her taking over that office, she made a very important speech which identified how poor we are at the representation of diverse communities within the public appointments. So we take that very seriously indeed. I think it's absolutely crucial that we get a proper representation right across society on public boards. And I think a good development, even in terms of we have lessons to learn here at the Assembly as well. And a good initiative yesterday was one that was put forward by the Speaker, Mitchell McLaughlin, to establish a women's caucus within the Assembly. And we were privileged to be at the launch of it last night. And Katrina Ryan is the chair of that, and Paula Bradley is the vice chair. And it's one of the best initiatives that there has been within the Assembly in terms of beginning that discussion around equality for women and how we can get more women into the Assembly. In the aftermath of the Assembly elections, obviously the hope is that more women will be represented in the benches. But there's a big job of work to be done, and I think we've got the right person in Judita Leslie. I think she's very focused on what she needs to do, and she will absolutely do it with our full support.
I think it is interesting. I went along to the Speaker's lunch today for female members who are here at the moment, but also past female members. It was good to see some colleagues here from the past. But an interesting statistic which she read out was the fact that there are no females here from the very first mandate. From the 2003 mandate, there are only 3, whilst the men have stayed on for a longer period of time and therefore have progressed more into leadership and ministerial positions. The 3 females who were here in 2003 and who are still here are Katrina Rowan, Dolores Kelly and myself. So that gives you an indication that we need to not just bring more women into Stormont, but to sustain them in Stormont as well, so that they stay and continue to move ahead, and I think that's important.
Just finally, Chair, the Education Minister was in with the committee this morning, and obviously paints we were talking about budget and programme for government, etc. going forward. And like we've touched on today, it's very difficult economic situations going forward, and there's going to be spending limits, public spending limits, as there always has been over the last few years. And even to stand still, like the Department of Health requires about a 6% uplift in its budget. The Department of Education could do with about 3%. You touched today at different points upon the need to be innovative and perhaps work with the community in the private sector or social sector as well. What innovative thinking are you thinking about? I know we succeeded, or the executive has succeeded in breaking its targets for European drawdown of funding over the last 5 years. Where is the potential to do this so that we can afford to give education and health that sort of uplift so we can have the services that we need?
And so it is about doing things differently, and the first thing that we're doing differently is setting the programme for government on an outcomes basis, and that will mean, as I said in my opening remarks, that education just doesn't belong to the Education Minister. It will belong right across government, and health the same. I do think that the Health Minister, in the work that he's doing on reform at the moment by trying to get buy-in from everybody, is the way forward. And we're very interested to see what comes out of that piece of work. It is about collaborating, it is about being more innovative and about using the resources in a different way. And that's a challenge. I accept that, because naturally people do not like change. They like to keep going in the way that they're going. But I think if they can see that it gives them a better outcome, then they will buy into it, and that's what we need to do.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. And Paul Frith.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you very much for your attendance. You've been here a long time, and I really do appreciate because you're all very, very busy people. I'll be brief, I promise. I suppose my first full term or mandate in this place, there are frustrations around the turn of pace, cogs turning slowly, and there are some ministers not making hard decisions when they should be made. I suppose my time as chairman of the Agriculture and Rural Development Committee, I've seen it first hand. First Minister, your work on dairy, working alongside DARD Minister, to help produce the Going for Growth strategy, which to me is a very successful piece of work. And the executive then published their response to that in 2014. With that comes hope. The Fresh Start Agreement comes with hope. And we've already managed a reduction in ministries, which hopefully will go some way to making government more streamlined. What's your hopes Minister, for the future, and you being now in the position you're in after having all your experience in ministerial life, what's your hopes for the new mandate as you go forward as First Minister?
Well, I think I said at the beginning as well that if we are to engage better with the community that we serve, there has to be that recognition that we are public servants and we are here because of the will of the people, and therefore we have to listen to what they want us to do in government office. Now, we will have hard decisions to take that not everyone will agree with, and I think the important thing is that we do take those decisions in a way that, whilst people don't understand, they at least respect that we had to take those tough decisions. So my hopes for the next mandate is that we continue on the path that we have now set out in Fresh Start, that we have budget sustainability, that we deal with the issues of the past, including returning to those very difficult legacy issues, and also to have in place structures and the resources to deal with the residue of paramilitaries and criminality, so that the young people that we see when we visit schools and what have you, who have no knowledge of what happened in the past, and thank goodness for it, can be hopeful and proud of this place as I am, and that's what I hope will happen in the next mandate.
The Fresh Start Agreement is critical for all of us moving forward. It really has to be a fresh start, and I think we've got off to a good start, and we're utterly determined to keep that going, because it's the only thing that works for us. If we are divided, if we can't find consensus around major issues about how we can develop our economy, how we get our education system right, how we ensure a proper health service for our people, then it's our responsibility. It comes back to us. And we all accept that we come out of what was a pretty bad 2 or 3 years just past. But I think we're in a far better place at the moment. You mentioned the Growing for Growth strategy, and I talked earlier about the fact that there were more people in manufacturing now than there was in 2008. The Growing for Growth is absolutely critical to getting even more people into manufacturing and increasing our exports, because we have quality products. And of course, the Dairy and Agriculture Minister had a projection of thousands of new jobs within the agri-food industry by 2020. So I think what we need to do is recognise that in the next mandate we have a wonderful opportunity to decisively move forward, to tackle all of the vital issues that our people depend upon, their politicians to take decisive decisions to improve their lives in a way that gives them and their children the best prospect for reaching their full potential.
There is still this mindset, I suppose, with individual MLAs that they must fight for their constituency, whether it be North Antrim or Fermanagh or wherever. But we can see very clearly that you reduce poverty by creating jobs. You don't need an anti-poverty strategy to create jobs, to reduce poverty. You can increase tourism in North Antrim by opening the Gobbins Path in East Antrim. And there's still that mindset of MLAs and maybe even ministers that think in silos. Do you see evidence of that breaking down as we mature as an institution, and does that bring hope then for the future also?
Well, I think the fact that we've all agreed, and we have all agreed, that in terms of putting a programme for government together for the next mandate, that programme for government is going to be agreed against the backdrop of none of the parties really knowing which department they're going to have under their control. And therefore, the scene is set prior to the running of the hunt and parties taking up their ministerial positions. But I do absolutely think that the more we break out of the silo mentality, the better it is for all of us. And the more that we recognise that by doing that, we can contribute to improving the lives of our people in a very dynamic way. Yeah, I mean, the individual MLAs will always fight their own constituents' corner, and that's only but right. That's what they're expected to do. But I think in the grand scheme of things, whenever ministers have their departmental responsibilities. The fact that they're going to have a programme for government which is based on outcomes and which is set before they take up ministerial positions goes a long way towards breaking down that silo mentality.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Three points if I may to finish. One, just clarification first, Minister. I think you said you wanted the sexual orientation strategy released by the end of the mandate?
Yes.
For consultation?
Yes. Has it not been consulted on before?
There's been a consultation period. There has been a big consultation.
There's a second.
Yes.
So just for
Yes.
clarity, it
Sorry.
will be out.
Yes,
before, okay.
agreed. Yeah.
The briefing says there's no current agreement on the development of Maze Long Kesh. Ministers continue to discuss a way forward. Is there anything you can say publicly?
Yeah, we are continuing to discuss a way forward, but to be totally frank and honest, I don't think that there will be a public exposition of that this side of the Assembly elections. On the other side of the Assembly elections, I'm much more optimistic.
I think we want to see the economic development of the site. It is a huge site, but you in particular, Chair, will be aware of the political sensitivities around that site. We're very much aware of that too, and we have to continue and will continue to bear those in mind, whether that's before the election or after the election, just to be clear, because we want to ensure that everyone is respected on that site.
This may be more Department of Social Development, but the Crumlin Road Courthouse,
yes,
is there any intention to bring it back into public ownership and take the fantastic development on the far side of the road and
I think there have been discussions around that, certainly with the Department of Social Development. I am not sure where those discussions are at present. You're right. With the fabulous development across the road, it is very difficult to look at that old courthouse, a courthouse that I appeared in. I know I look too young, but there you go. Just before it closed, and I would very much like to see that matter dealt with. But you're right; it is a matter for the Department of Social Development.
Okay.
Although I think all of us accept that if it's possible to bring that under public control as opposed to private control. The linkage between the prison and what's happening there, and of course the visitors to the prison have been a phenomenal success. Huge numbers of tourists going there, huge numbers of events being held there, and of course the tunnel across the road to the courthouse is, somebody said to me whenever we done a visit to it, it's a North American tourist's dream. Be able to walk across, come up the other side, stand up on the dock and take their photographs. Although I think the building could be put to much more use than that, but that could be accommodated also.
Indeed. Well, once again, on behalf of the committee, thank you very much. You've given us a little over 2 hours. We appreciate your time. Thank you. Members, with your permission, I'm going to jump ahead on the agenda to item 9, because this is something that we have to agree today, and that is our legacy report. And before putting a formal question, I'd like to draw your attention to some amendments. So if you have your packs to hand, we begin at page 258 to inform you that paragraph 37 has been updated to reflect the comments made last week in terms of the frequency of ministerial briefings. And 2 pages on at 260 and paragraph 47. Are we thinking of having to update?
Chair, there's potential. The figures relating to SIF expenditure have been taken from a briefing that the committee had in January, and it's possible that might be updated during the subsequent briefing with PFG. So if members are content, I can use the next briefing after the event to update those figures.
Okay. Page 257, then paragraph 50, will need to be amended to reflect the response regarding the continuation of the EU task force. And there's a text of an amendment there in your tabled pack at page 26. The next paragraph is 65 on page 264. It needs to be updated to reflect our decision on the formal ruling to set the Ombudsman's salary. which we did, what, last week?
We did the proposal last week, Chair.
So
It's
we
likely
still-
that the formal rule will be next week.
Right, so we're still to totally sign off on that?
Yes.
Okay. Paragraph 66, the next paragraph, also page 264, has to reflect the committee's decision that we're about to make today on the VSS retention and disposal schedule. And finally, the Deputy Chair suggests the inclusion of the UK reporting cycle to the UN and Council of Europe treaties. There's a full text, again tabled at page 26.
Yeah, Chair, it's effectively just to leave a legacy proposal to the next committee that they follow closely those key reporting dates and issues. So I don't think it's anything particularly controversial.
Okay. Well, then, members, any other comments on proposed amendments or any other part of the report? If not, we go to the formal questions, which we must do. So, formally, members, I ask first, are members content with the remit and powers section of the report? Thank you. Content with the committee bills section of the report, paragraphs 1 to 3?
Agreed.
Thank you. Content with the inquiry section, paragraphs 4 to 12?
Agreed.
Thank you. Content with the legislation section, paragraphs 13 to 21? Thank you. Content with policy scrutiny section, paragraphs 22 to 32? Thank you. Content with the legislative consent motions section, paragraph 33? Thank you. Content with the forthcoming issues section of the report, which is paragraphs 34 to 52, subject to the amendment of 47. Thank you. Content to include the UK reporting cycle to the UN and Council of Europe treaties as a forthcoming issue as proposed by Deputy Chair. Thank you. Are members content with the work of the committee during the 2015-16 session section of the report? That's paragraphs 53 to 83, with amendments to paragraphs 65 and 66 to reflect our decisions on statutory rules. Thank you. And are members content that statistical and financial information relevant to the appendices be inserted into the report once finalised after the final meeting of the committee next week?
Agreed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Back to matters arising then.
So, members, we go back to matters arising. Last week, the committee noted a ministerial determination reflecting the ministerial positions in the new 9-departmental structure, and a copy of the ministerial determination is in your table pack at page 3. It's subject to approval by resolution of the Assembly, and procedurally, I'm therefore required to formally put the question that the committee recommends the direction is approved by the committee.
By the Assembly, sir.
Sorry, the Assembly. The direction is approved by the Assembly. And a copy of the plenary motion is in your table pack at page 4. In the absence of comment, I will go straight to the question, and it is that the Committee for the Office of the First Minister and Deputy First Minister has considered the Ministerial Offices, Numbers and Functions Determination 2016 and recommends it is approved by the Assembly. Are we agreed? We are, thank you. Page 5 and table, members, with correspondence from John McCourt of Survivors North West. And he has raised concerns that the group was not invited to attend the briefing with Savia and Amnesty International last week. Now, I did ask the clerk to look to see if there had been previous correspondence.
None. There's none received directly from the group, no.
So there is no particular reason why this committee should have been aware of Survivors North West, as they had not previously contacted us. And we met Savia and Amnesty because they asked to meet us and had sent us a briefing. So is the committee content if we go back and make that clear, and also invite Mr McCourt to send us a written brief on his concerns?
Agreed, yeah.
Yep. Okay, thank you. The list of outstanding correspondence begins at page 145. In the absence of comment, I'll direct you to the summary sheet at page 148 of correspondence received since we last met. At page 150, there's a response from the Department regarding the continuation of the Northern Ireland Task Force. Are members content to publish that correspondence on the EU Issues section of the Committee's website? Thank you. Page 151 is correspondence from the Department with regard to points raised by the all-party group on visual impairment. And are members content to forward this correspondence to the all-party group on visual impairment for their information? Thank you. Page 190 is correspondence from the Northern Ireland Commissioner for Children and Young People with regard to further information as requested at the briefing session on the 24th of February. Are you content to forward that correspondence to the Department for comment? Thank you. And can I also draw your attention to the response from the Department regarding the Women's Centred Childcare Fund and the functions of the Economic Policy Unit. That's page 22 of tabled. Any other matters relating to correspondence, members?
Chair, briefly, I think there's correspondence here in relation to the Together Build United Community Engagement Forum. Would it be possible to write to the Department to seek clarity around whether they will accept the recommendation for an annual report and debate on the Assembly? Is that what we recommended? No?
Sure, yeah, that was recommended. I think
Okay.
about the annual report, I think that has been discussed with the departments, with other departments, and my understanding is that that is something that really they are moving forward with. As to the
Possibly
debate,
ask them when then?
I'm not sure about the debate, although
Okay.
in that respect, if the department doesn't bring forward a debate,
We could, or the
committee
could.
the new committee could, yeah.
Okay, thanks, Chair.
Next, members, is the draft forward work programme. That's for the committee's final meeting next week. It's at page 223. In the absence of comment, could I just make clear that this is my last meeting, so I want to formally put on record my thanks to the committee staff. There's been quite a churn over the last 5 years, but consistently excellent support from the staff. And also thanks to you, the members of the committee, because I do think we have done some very positive things. We brought forward as a committee for the first time a bill, Public Service Ombudsman. I think we did very good work on victims and survivors, particularly the service, and also in shaping the nature of the historical institutional abuse inquiry, not least the start date being knocked back to the 1920s. So thank you very much. Members, we're now due to consider the Survivors Service Data Retention and Disposal Policy and Schedule. This is required to be laid before the Assembly under Section 8.2 of the Public Records Act Northern Ireland of 1923. And in accordance with the rules of the Disposal of Documents Orders 1925, and this is all through the Public Records Office of Northern Ireland. So the schedule is at page 277 of your packs, and it is subject to the negative resolution procedure. If there is no comment, I put the question that the Committee for the Office of the First Minister and Deputy First Minister has considered the Victims and Survivors Service Data Retention and Disposal Policy and Schedule and has no objections to the schedule. Are we agreed? Thank you. Oh yes, now we've done 9. And now we move to our briefing from departmental officials on programme for government commitments. On our previous occasions, briefings have been split over 2 sessions, but today we will have one covering all relevant PFG commitments to the Office of the First Minister and Deputy First Minister. We have a clerk's brief at page 273, and papers for the session are provided at Appendix 1 of the ministerial briefing papers, and that's page 20. You also have your blue folders, which have been updated with papers from the briefing last June. So, we welcome Dr. Mark Brown, Under-Secretary of Finance, Strategic Planning and Social Change. We welcome Joe Reynolds, the Acting Director of Programme for Government and DSC. Margaret Rose McNaughton, Director, Equality and Reform Directorate. And Ricky Irwin, Director of Finance, Strategic Planning and Social...
No.
No?
That's Mark. Social Investment and Victims.
Director of Social Investment and Victims?
Correct.
Right. This information came from your department, by the way. Anyway, Mark, are you leading?
Yes, Chair.
Thank you very much, Chair, for the opportunity to come. I'm conscious that you've already had a very long session with the main event, and we feel like the supporting event coming after it, but we're very pleased to be here. And we have sent to the committee a summary of progress on each of the commitments. I will make very, very brief comments because I'm sure you want to move to questions as quickly as possible. Within the Programme for Government, OFMDFM has 14 commitments. Of these, at the end of the original PFG period at the 31st of March, 9 were assessed as being complete. These would include the One Plan, the City of Culture, the Competitive EU Funding Drawdown Target, the Childcare Strategy Target, the Delivering Social Change Commitment, including the Social Protection Fund, the commitment relating to the Advisory Committee on Hardship, Together Building a United Community, or the Cohesion, Sharing and Integration Strategy Commitment, the commitment around structures of government. In addition, there was the 2 commitments relating to the Social Investment Fund, where the target was not met, but was been very significant progress made, and a number of commitments which have not been met and were touched on in the earlier session in relation, for example, to Maize Long Cash, the Child Poverty Strategy, and to the age discrimination legislation. Since March 2015, we have continued to make progress across a range of these areas. For example, moving ahead and drawing down additional EU funds, increasing the commitment of resources under the Social Investment Fund and the Childcare Strategy, taking forward the implementation and evaluation of delivering social change programmes, and continuing the development and implementation of Together Building a United Community programmes. In addition, a key focus of the work of the Department has been in supporting work on the new programme for government, a new outcomes-focused programme for government, and we've been working on a collaborative basis with permanent secretaries and special advisors and a range of others to draw up and help to take forward work around the new programme for government, which will set out a framework that will meet the aspirations that people have and want to see supported by the executive, that will ensure that we have the evidence available to us to tell us what works best in terms of addressing those aspirations, and will set out the different ways in which we will work to deliver against an outcomes-focused programme for government. And that work is intended to put in place an evidence base for political parties to work from in the development process following the election. So that's all I want to say at this point, Chair. I'm happy to take questions on any of the commitments that they...
Thank you, and I appreciate the brevity, Mark. The Maize Long Cash Development Corporation had a revised business plan for 14-15, but it wasn't approved by ministers until 1st of April 15. Was there then a 15-16 business plan agreed?
The 15-16 business plan that is currently with ministers at the moment, Chair.
With a couple of weeks to go.
It's a couple of weeks to go, and my recollection is that actually has been approved. I would have to check on that, but I think that has been approved.
I mean, are there any priorities for the site beyond keeping it safe?
Well, really, Chair, because of, and it was referred to at the previous session, because of the lack of political agreement on the way forward at this point, the key role for the board has been around health and safety and maintenance of the site and of the various retained and listed buildings on the site, but also importantly in facilitating the Royal Ulster Agricultural Show each year and ensuring that is a success, and it has been a success and has been a growing success each year. There's also been an important development with the movement of the new pavilion to the maize from the previous site, which has improved the facilities that are available for the hosting of the show. So there has been some development, but it has been limited by the fact that there hasn't been that political agreement.
So the RUS are pushing ahead?
The RUS have been able to make some steps forward, particularly around that pavilion.
But the road structure has not been progressed?
Without agreement around the site and the appropriate budgets, there hasn't been the possibility to take forward that sort of infrastructural development.
Sure. In terms of competitive EU funds, way beyond the target in drawdown. So what advice are you giving to ministers in terms of potential targets for the next programme for government?
Well, first of all, we want to ensure that we are well positioned and we maintain the position that we have in terms of drawing down competitive funds. I mean, these are an important source of additional funding. They are a source that require proper organisation across departments and proper collaboration if we are to access them. This is not money that falls easily into your lap. You have to ensure that proper applications are made, those applications are strong, you have to develop networks, you have to be aware of calls, you have to be influential in those calls and bring forward good, strong applications. So we have a network in place that facilitates that through the various coordinators which are there both in the universities and in AFBI. We have exceeded the target that was set, but you and I have discussed this before, Chair, and we were aware that the first target was set somewhat blindly, to be fair. We weren't really sure what was possible. We have a better idea now of what is possible, and we would hope to build on that. So we will want to look carefully at this to ensure that we continue to make progress and we continue to draw down funds in this important area.
Okay, delivering social change, Mark, you would have heard, I was asking about the play and leisure. I got the impression from the ministers it doesn't exist anymore. Can you confirm that? And that the objectives are being met through other activities. So I'm just seeking clarity. I'm not.
Yeah. Well, I'll make a few comments on that. I know Margaret Rose will carry through with a little bit of the detail. The Play and Leisure programme was announced as the 7 Signature programme. The intention at that point is that it would have a budget of 1.6 million. That, of course, is subject to that money being available. I don't need to tell the committee how difficult times have been and what pressures there have been around resource. So the anticipated budget to take that forward wasn't there. So what we have done is to look at how we can take forward the aims and objectives of that programme through existing departmental programmes, to look at how we can work with departments to try and ensure that they are taking the opportunities that there are to progress work in play and leisure. And I say Margaret will give you a little bit more detail on that in a second. And the second thing we have done within our own programmes, I think it was mentioned alluded to in the last session, is that some of our programmes are in fact taking this forward. Some of the SIF programmes relate to the development of leisure programmes in terms of the 3G pitches and so forth that are available. So a number of those play into that. But we've been working mainly with other departments. Margaret, would you like to say a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think Junior Minister McCann alluded to it that through the summer camps there was obviously an element of play and leisure. But as Mark said, when there was no money available for this programme, we started to look at other ways in which we could actually deliver some aspects of it. We have a play symposium tonight and tomorrow, whereby England, Scotland and Wales are over here. They're sharing their experiences with us and explaining, how they are actually managing to bring forward, some really good initiatives as well. And again, in the absence of very little funding. As Mark said, there are a number of the SIF projects that are now specific around play and leisure. I don't have the actual costings associated with that, but I do think it's a substantial investment in play and leisure as a result of some of those projects. So we are having to look at other ways of doing things. We do have, we have identified 3 very specific outcomes, and we have worked with stakeholders to actually develop those outcomes a little further. And part of tomorrow and the whole symposium tomorrow is to make sure that we do engage with our stakeholders and get our plan on target again. But there certainly is a programme of work there in terms of play and leisure. And we will want to progress it, and we will want to continue to seek funding in other areas, as indeed through the normal traditional route as well.
I think Alex Atwood wants to come in.
First of all, can I apologise, because once I've asked this question and got an answer, I have to go, because I have another meeting at 5 that I have to attend to. But I just want to take you back to your previous answer, which I find hard to accept, when you said that when it came to European discretionary funds, at the target of drawdown, well, it was worked somewhat blindly. I think that was the word you used. I can't accept that as an answer, because discretionary funds in Europe have been available for a long period of time, and Northern Ireland departments have been able to access them for a long period of time. And we're now nearly 10 years since the restoration of the solution. So there's been plenty of time to be doing something other than doing it blindly. So I don't accept that assessment of where the target was and what the target has ended up. That target was deliberately chosen because it was low, because we have been weak in drawing down discretionary funds. That's the right answer, I would suggest, rather than just saying, well, we're a suck it and see sort of approach. That doesn't bear interrogation.
Well, I don't accept that interpretation. There has indeed been a long period over which departments have been drawing down the funding. When I say it was done blindly, there hadn't been the centralised collation of information around the funds that were drawn down. There were differences in the way the funding was being recorded by departments, whether, for example, it had to be pure departmental or whether a third party could score. So we didn't know the base that we were starting from. And indeed, over the time in which the information was collected, there were a number of adjustments made to the information to try and get it on a sound and consistent basis. So in that sense, we didn't have clarity over where we actually were at this point in time. The second thing we didn't have clarity over was the extent, what the potential was to do more. Because there hadn't been that concerted focus in this area, there hadn't been a full sharing of best practice. Some departments were very good at this, other departments really hadn't focused very much on it and weren't aware of best practice. So we weren't aware of what the potential was. So when I say it was set blindly, I don't mean we had absolutely no information. What I mean is the information we had wasn't consistent, it wasn't complete, and we weren't fully aware of what the potential was because of the differential participation of departments. And I'm bringing all departments on to, or putting the focus on this, and encouraging all departments to participate. That has enhanced significantly the target. I don't think anyone could really have put a target there that they could say was absolutely correct and the right target. I think we're in a much better position in this next period. So I think, okay, blindly you may think that's slightly overstating it, but I still think the full information to set a clear target wasn't there.
I think your answer is fuller, but what it reflects is systemic failures within government and government departments in terms of what the baseline was and what the craft should be in accessing funds. But on the far side of all that, would you not agree that, for example, when you compare the drawdown of FP7, Dublin, Belfast, or the anticipated drawdown of Horizon 2020, Belfast and Dublin, we're still not at the races?
So both Belfast and Dublin?
No. That Dublin clearly demonstrate. They have a target of 1.4 billion drawdown of Horizon 2020 euro, and as we learned from FP7, their target or their drawdown of 900 million euro was beyond by a third, by half even, what they had anticipated. So when we compare what's happening 100 miles away from Dublin and what we are doing in terms of drawdown of that sort of discretionary fund, we're not at the races yet, are we?
Well, certainly Dublin is ahead of us by some distance in this, and I think there are a number of reasons for that, and we're trying to learn, and we have had contact with our southern counterparts to try and learn from their experience. But they, for example, have a much more significant university sector. They are a member state. They have access to all the committees. They are on the committee. They can influence the shape of the calls. So they have those links, and they have that influence which we don't have as a region. And they play that very effective. I mean, the South are very effective operators in Europe. There's no question about that. And they use that to their advantage in this area. They also have a much more significant private sector. And when you're looking at a lot of these calls, you have to be able to draw in quite often private sector expertise, and we suffer from that. So there are a number of disadvantages that we have, but I think we have, I mean, this target is one that we have exceeded. The target may not have been set as high as it could have been set, but this is a measure of success. I don't think it can be viewed in any other way. This has been a success, and what we want to do is to build on it.
So just before I go then, can you share at all what the recommendation to the FP is in terms of drawdown in the next mandate discretionary fund?
We're not at that stage yet, Alex, in terms of
I do apologise.
we're at the high level of outcomes for the programme, but we're not yet at the details here. That will be some way down the track.
Thank you very much.
I want to go back to this budget, Mark, because I'm just seeking clarity. Are you saying that one of the issues for the signature project called Play and Leisure was that a lack of funds?
Yes.
Yes. Well, I am looking at your website, and I'm going to quote, in October 2013, junior ministers announced an investment of 1.6 million to enhance play and leisure opportunities for children and young people. There's no junior ministers are going to see if they can source 1.6 million. They announced an investment of 1.6 million.
And one of the
Did
issues...
that money exist when they announced it?
The money did exist in the sense that there are central funds which are available to cover a range of areas, and in trying to manage those central funds, this is the 14 million resource and the 15 million capital that we use for SIF and we use for childcare and we've used for other signature projects, and money was being put to those signature projects because of some of the delays that we've talked about before in getting stuff off the ground. There was money was becoming available. So the assessment had to be made as to whether there were funds available to be put to other projects. And at the point at which that was announced, the intention was that, and the expectation was that there would be sufficient scope in the budget to be able to do that. As it turned out, with the pressures in other areas, that funding wasn't available, and so the view was taken that we would have to put that, take that forward in a different way.
Where on the website will I find the announcement that they're not investing 1.6 million in this programme?
Well, the junior ministers have made clear that we're taking this forward and working with other departments. We've reported this to the committee. That is the way we're taking this forward.
Can I supplement that, sir?
Yeah. I'm sorry, I'm still not clear. And the last time we had a briefing on DSC and signature projects, nobody mentioned the play and leisure. We talked about the 6 original and the 3 Atlantic Philanthropy funding.
Maybe that's why, Chair.
Because it doesn't exist.
How much of the 1.6 million announced was spent or was allocated to play and leisure?
Well, that's the point I'm making, is that within that broader budget pot, there are a number of competing demands, and the planning assumption was that money would be available. When it came to look at the actual allocations that were required and the competing priorities, the money wasn't available to actually put
so was
to
there ever a
budget
call?
in that time frame.
Was there ever a call for organisations to pitch for a chunk of that money?
No. We didn't get to that point. But can I say that...
So zero?
So it was an announcement that never took off?
Can I say that there was a number of projects and have been developed through the SIF scheme that are specifically on play and leisure, and there is a significant investment around those. I don't have the figure with me today, but I can...
I'm not contesting that. I'm not contesting that the department is doing things in this area. What I'm saying is this signature programme never actually existed. It was announced in October 2013 by ministers of the department. It was an investment of 1.6 million. These are not my words. These are your words.
I don't think, Chair, it's correct to say that the programme never existed. The programme was announced, and the intention was that there would be the budget you've identified associated with it. That budget, because of other pressures, wasn't available, so the view was taken that the signature programme that had been announced would be taken forward in a range of different ways.
But there was no call. There was no call. There was no organisation that bid.
But if we're taking it forward, there wouldn't be the need for the same kind of approach in terms of an open call when we're working with other departments and working to influence their expenditure and working to influence their policies in order to incorporate within it a greater degree of play and leisure. And that is the way we've been taking this signature programme forward.
It's a signature programme. It's a programme.
Can I add to some of the
Nobody
things?
got to pitch for.
Can I add for
Yes,
some of the things,
go
that some of the, I did mention that we had developed 3 outcomes, one of them being every child playing more, and one of the activities around that would be like the development and dissemination of guidance for teachers on how play could be utilised within the curriculum more. So it's not necessarily that there would be a call or a grant scheme associated with the signature programme. There are other things like developing a charter for play to promote Article 31 using health visitors, interactions with new mothers to promote and to highlight the importance of play. So these are things that we do, hope to do, and indeed
I'm not contesting that. I would feel more comfortable, I would have more respect if the answer was, we made that announcement October 2013, and then we discovered better ways to deliver the same objective.
I think, Chair, that's what I said. I said that we had the signature programme was announced. It was anticipated there would be a certain budget. When there were financial pressures around that, we looked at other ways of delivering the objectives of the programme, and Margaret Rose has set out a number of ways in which they were delivered. Many of these programmes can be delivered at low cost or no cost, and I would have thought that it would be a benefit to be able to deliver the outcomes of a programme at low cost or no cost, rather than having to put substantial amounts of money to something.
You're advising us that in terms of nurture units, the family support hubs, parenting support, community family support, even the social enterprise hubs will continue after March through alternative funding sources coming forward from lead departments. Have those lead departments given solid commitments to funding these things?
No, I don't believe that the departments are yet in a position to give solid commitments to those, because many of them are still working through the detail of their allocations for next year. And we will be working through their budgets. But the information we have got from them is that their intention and their what they would plan to do is to continue those on. But we await final decisions by ministers.
Have you been able to do a risk assessment?
Have we been able to do a risk assessment? Well, that would be for the individual departments to do around this. But the programmes have been successful. The departments are very supportive of them. What they're trying to look at now is whether, given the reductions in budgets that there are next year, whether it will be possible for them to continue, and if so, in what form they can continue.
Okay. Deputy Chair Chrisley.
Thanks, Chair. I suppose to follow up on the play and leisure policy, the outcomes that you talk about, Margaret, are obviously really important outcomes, and it's a really important area. I suppose when you consider how sedentary lifestyle is becoming, in modern times, how crucial it is that parents, community groups are equipped to know how to encourage and facilitate play and leisure. So the Chair, I think, has exposed a pretty startling development that a £1.6 million programme was advertised, and there wasn't any information up to now to advise anybody that hadn't actually happened, or had happened in different ways. Although I'm not sure how the department can use SIF, the Social Investment Fund, to deliver an issue that, when the concept of social investment fund is bottom-up suggestions. So I don't know how the department uses that to deliver something that other people are making the decisions on what gets delivered to a certain extent.
Well, to pick the last point first, I think, and particularly as we move forward into a programme for government which is outcomes focused, really how something is delivered and who delivers it is less important than it is actually delivered and the outcome it's achieved. So I think what we were saying is that what we were interested in the play and leisure programme was not that there would be a certain amount of money and a call and all the rest of it, but that the outcomes of the programme would be achieved. And faced with the financial pressures, we looked at other ways in which that could be done, and we have harnessed the programmes that are currently going on within other departments to try and achieve those outcomes. And if we can achieve the same outcomes by tweaking existing mainstream programmes at low cost or no cost, and at a saving in terms of funding that might otherwise have to be used, I think that's a positive point, albeit it wasn't the way we had intended originally the programme to be taken forward.
I think at best it has been really difficult to follow what has actually happened, and it is a really, really important area of provision. So I presume that will transfer to Department of Education anyway. So
yeah.
I suppose those people who are elected and on the Education Committee can try and ensure that that is something that gets adequately developed. It may lead me into another short question here, and it's good to have you here. I think I now know at this stage of the mandate what everybody does. It's taken a while to get there, but it's interesting to have you all here on the various different issues. So I'll start with Ricky, because I think I know that you deal with Social Investment Fund and victims and survivors now, so that's excellent. I suppose I'd ask you the same thing that I asked the ministers, just to seek further reassurance. As a member of a steering group, people have raised concerns about access to information, regular updates, and as a member of the committee, it's really just to get your feedback in relation to that you're confident that improvements will be made in terms of access to information, and that your reassurance that appropriate processes in terms of governance and funded allocations are being followed.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. We can provide that assurance that we are following procedures and adhering to all governance requirements. In terms of information sharing, if you're referring to the Social Investment Fund, certainly as a member of the steering group, you'll be aware of the level of communication and engagement that we have and will continue to have with those steering groups. We would see that continuing for some time, while some key decisions that steering groups need to make around prioritisation of projects will carry on, and certainly in relation to sharing information with the committee, we're very happy to provide any or try to meet any information requests around specific projects or zones or
maybe it's something for me to follow up with you, because my point is that there isn't good communication there, but that's maybe something we can follow up. Margaret Rose, Children and Young People. Is it possible to get an update on the Children and Young People strategy?
Okay, yeah, I mean, there has been a significant amount of work done on the co-design process, and of course that will transfer, as you know, over to Department of Education. But we have had, a number of meetings with different organisations, including, this meeting was postponed. I think it's taking place next week. We want to include this time something specifically around maybe children with disabilities. And indeed, I'd like to build the play and leisure in there as well, so that you're right that it is taken forward whenever it moves over to Department of Education. So a lot of work has been done. The intention is that through the the Children's Services Cooperation Act, we need to have the strategy published and laid, I think, in the Assembly, and I think it's beginning of December. So, we need to just keep moving at the pace we're moving at. It is, it's 9 months from now, but what it is certainly doable.
Does that go to Department of Education as well then?
Yeah.
Strategy, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. Mark, I'll let you off. You've said enough. Joe, you're sitting there very quietly. Joe, my understanding is you're working on preparation for the next programme for government, if I'm not wrong. So, can you give us any update on the type of work that's going into engage with the public organisations in relation to the programme for government?
Yeah. Well, as we came to the end of the original programme that was set for 11 to 15, we undertook a review of that programme, and in conjunction with that, we also then began a process of consultation with the public. That took a variety of different forms, everything from face-to-face engagement, one-to-one interviews, focus groups, surveys through the facilities that we have available within government. There's a quarterly survey done and that's obviously demographically reflective of the population, to take on board what it was they wanted to do. I think in your earlier session with the ministers, they made it very clear that they were here as public servants to deliver for the will of the public. We took the information we gathered from those various different channels of communication and compared that against statistical information and the various data, qualitative and quantitative, that we hold within government about the issues that were raised through that process, and having identified from that then the issues that we want to see feature in the construction of the next programme for government, we've got a process of consultation with senior officials across departments, as well as representatives of the parties that sit in government at the moment. That's taken us to a situation where we have reasonably advanced progress in respect of identifying what we think sort of outcomes that an incoming executive might want to look at, and a structure around how we would measure progress towards the delivery of those.
Will there be a consultation on a draft programme for government at some stage, or is it just?
I think what we're aiming for at this stage is that we'll develop a programme for government framework, which again, as alluded to in the earlier session with ministers, under the terms of the Stormont House Agreement, those who have an entitlement to sit in the incoming executive are asked to resolve within a fixed period of time after the next election. And then we would expect that having been resolved, and after that, ministers having taken their portfolios, they would bring forward to the Assembly for debate and then a period of public consultation.
Okay. In terms of this mandate, the progress reporting has changed from the last mandate. How, if you're, as you are, a taxpayer, how open and accessible is this end of mandate programme for government progress reporting, in your opinion?
That was a system.
I'll give you one supplement. The strategic online report, as far as I can see, most of the updates are 2014. It seems pretty out of date. So I'll ask again, how open and accessible do you think the progress reporting is?
I think, well, more recent progress reports should be on that to bring it up to the end of the original mandate for March 2015. I think further reporting could be done in terms of what we've done this year. Obviously, again, as alluded to earlier, there were particular circumstances which underpinned the way in which we developed the plans for last year. We would have wanted to see a different approach taken, but that was caught in the general political situation that we found ourselves in. And perhaps some of the reporting against what has been the extension to the programme and the work that the departments have done across all of the commitments in the original programme has continued to be delivered, continued to be reported. We maintain the governance structures within, but perhaps the public face of that, especially over the last 12 months, hasn't been all that we would have wanted.
Yeah, I think it's a real gap. I think my recollection from the last mandate was there was it was a written statement, from OFMDFM in relation to end of mandate programme for government progress report. My understanding was prior to that it was an oral statement in the House that you were able to ask questions of. This time it seems like it's nothing other than the strategic online report. So it seems, in my opinion, it seems to be getting worse rather than better. But that'll be something for the next Assembly to consider.
I think that is something that we want to take account of whenever we're looking at the arrangements that we put in place for the next programme for government, and clearly that we take on board your comments. And
I think that the online tool has its purpose in terms of being there and accessible for people, but I think the public are. I know we have an end of mandate short session next week, but I think the public are entitled to a slightly more substantive session on the floor of the Assembly in relation to whether the executive did what it said it was going to do.
Well, part of what we're looking at in looking at the next programme for government, and Joe alluded to it, is how we give better access and how we give greater clarity about progress. And the structure of the next programme for government will be of high-level outcomes, and below that a series of indicators that tell you whether you're moving towards those high-level outcomes. And what we'll want to do is to publish regularly the statistical information that tells us how those indicators are moving, so we know whether we're moving towards the high-level outcomes. There'll also be below that specific actions which you can look at whether they've been achieved or not. But that's almost like a dial telling you, are we moving towards these outcomes or not, is the intention. It's something that Scotland does. We've been looking closely at how they have set out their systems, and we're hoping that we'll be able to take that work forward.
Finally, because what I noticed in the last one was a traffic light system, if memory serves me correct, in 2010. And what you notice, there were a lot of green lights, and even on this occasion there may well be a lot of green lights. So in addition to missing the opportunity to scrutinise where things haven't gone well, you're also missing the opportunity to, although ministers rarely miss these opportunities, but you are potentially missing the opportunity to say things that have been delivered, so I think it's something to work on. Thanks, Chair.
That also reflects the broader principle that we're moving to in terms of the development of the next programme for government, because having an outcomes focus means to say that those traffic lights have tended to relate to inputs and outputs, and we're moving away from that towards something that actually makes a difference to citizens and in their lives, and that should be more significant.
Members?
Exhaustion, I think.
You picked a good day. Kairos, Joe, Ricky, Mark.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Members, there is one more item of business. We had been scheduled to receive a written update on the gender equality strategy today. Correspondence on this matter is in your pack, starting at 277. It advises a small, quote, drafting group is to be formed with the objective of structuring the strategy, and a further meeting of the Gender Advisory Panel is scheduled for June or July of this year. So we cannot discuss it. Which brings us to any other business. If not, the meeting is adjourned until Wednesday the 16th, 2 p.m, room 30, the final meeting of the mandate and of the committee as constituted.
Very emotional.